Chapter 105, Team Operation. Everyone in the room turned their gazes away from Kendall to Jian Chen, but the moment they saw his young face, everyone was astonished. However, Jian Chen's words had a flattering effect on them. He needed to make a good impression since first impressions were very important when meeting new people. Brother Jian Chen, your name is Jian Chen, right? Come and sit down quickly. No matter how young you are, the moment you join our group, you are our brother to enjoy blessings and endure misfortune together with. In the future, if you find someone that is bullying you, come and find me. A tall but sturdy person spoke as he got up from the bed. Crossing over to Jian Chen, he placed his right hand on his shoulder and then pushing him towards the table to sit at. Jian Chen smiled, this one doesn't know how to call his older brother. Looking at the man, Jian Chen thought him to be quite sturdy with his muscles protruding out noticeably. From his stature and physique, the man looked to be in his 30s, and even in the dark room, Jian Chen could tell that this man was relatively dark-skinned to the point of resembling a black person. His entire body was filled with scars and old injuries that seemed to have originated from magical beasts. Just one look at him and Jian Chen could tell that the man was quite experienced with dealing with magical beasts. I'm called Hu Pa. Brother Jian Chen, if you don't mind, feel free to call me Big Brother Hu Pa in the future. Since I'm older than you, it's not going to be all that bad anyways. He sat by Jian Chen's side and poured him a glass of water with a big smile. Alright then, in the future I'll call you Brother Hu Pa. Jian Chen laughed. At that point, the people who were previously drinking in the middle of the room stood up as well. Brother Jian Chen, let me introduce you to everyone. Kendall pointed his fingers at a few of the people around them. Excluding Jian Chen and Kendall, there was another 6 male mercenaries. Their age ranged around 30 to 40 years old, and there were even 2 twins in the small group named Zhou De Kai and Zhou Shao Kai who were both 28 years old. The both of them had the power of a great saint and had the same exact facial features. If it were not for the fact one of them had a scar over their forehead, then it would have been extremely difficult to tell which one of the twins was the older twin and which was the younger twin. The other 4 people were 32 years old, and aside from the primary great saint Hu Pa, the other 3 people were called Yun Xian, Xiao Dao, and Chang Ning Feng. Yun Xian was relatively tall with a wisely face that made him look like a scholar. At the age of 25, he possessed the strength of a middle saint. Xiao Dao on the other hand was tiny, and with his skinny body, he almost looked like a skeleton. In comparison to Yun Xian, Xiao Dao was seemingly weaker than him. Aside from Jian Chen, Xiao Dao was the youngest of the bunch at the age of 22 years old who also had the strength of a middle saint. Chang Ning Feng was a middle-aged man with a calm composure. At the age of 30, Ning Feng was 2 years older than Hu Pa and was a middle great saint. Jian Chen, this is our flame mercenaries group. Aside from the people here, there are another 2 people at the market buying items, but I'm sure they'll be back soon. Kendall said. Tomorrow will be another operation for the flame mercenaries where everyone will be participating in. Brother Jian Chen, are you willing to join us? There aren't many rules, but if you don't want to join, then no one will try to force you. This is a voluntary event. Operation? What type of operation? Jian Chen blinked curiously. Kendall gave an incredulous stare at Jian Chen before downing the wine in the cup from the table. What other type of operation is there? We're going to go to the Magical Beast Mountain Range to hunt for magical beasts. After all, our flame mercenaries was created for those who wanted to group together to hunt for magical beasts. With our current strength, selling the monster cores are all that we can do to earn money. Then of course I'll go. What other reason do I need to go to the Magical Beast Mountain Range? Jian Chen chuckled as he replied. Brother Jian Chen, you don't need to worry. Although you've a weaker strength than us, our combined profits won't exclude you in any way. If your contributions are enough, then you'll get your fair share in accordance to the distribution. Jian Chen, the Magical Beast Mountain Range is very evil and is filled with hidden dangers. In the case that we come across a Class 3 magical beast that the captain and your older brothers cannot handle, then it is very possible that your life will be lost. So Jian Chen, take your time and think about if you really want to go or not. The speaker this time was the youngest person aside from Jian Chen, Xiao Dao. His shining eyes stared at Jian Chen with a sincere expression. From his voice, a serious tone could be heard, warning Jian Chen of the dangers with a heartfelt message. Hearing Xiao Dao speak, everyone in the room grew even more solemn. A Class 3 magical beast was enough to bring about a huge amount of pressure. Even though Captain Kendall had the strength of a primary Saint Master, but when it came to a Class 3 magical beast, he would only be able to protect himself. It was oftenly seen that a magical beast was stronger than its same-level human counterpart. On the Tian Yuan continent, if one wanted to go hunt for magical beasts at the same level as them, they wouldn't stand a chance against the strong magical beasts without a strong cultivation or battle skill. This was practically an impossible task unless one had an attributed saint force. Otherwise, it was better to run away to preserve your own life. And even though Captain Kendall was a primary Saint Master, his Saint Force didn't have an attribute, so his attacks would be far weaker than those with an attribute. Against a regular Class 3 magical beast, while he could fight it, it was only to protect himself. If he were to come across a stronger or faster Class 3 magical beast, then even Captain Kendall would be hard-pressed to escape with his life and most likely end up as a type of cuisine for the magical beasts to enjoy. But no one in the room would have expected that the moment Jian Chen heard the words Class 3 magical beast, there would be disdain in his eyes. The moment he had become a primary great saint, he had already started to hunt and kill Class 3 magical beasts by himself. It could be said that the regular Class 3 magical beasts posed no threat to Jian Chen at all other than the silver-striped golden snake. By this point in time, Jian Chen's strength was already at the middle great saint level, which was even stronger than a primary great saint many times over. Don't worry everyone, my strength isn't all that weak. After going to the magical beast mountain range once in the past, I've learned many things in there. Jian Chen said. Chapter 106, The Peculiar Dantian. Following that, Jian Chen and the Flame Mercenaries began to talk about the many interesting things they had heard about while traveling through the Tian Yuan continent. As they talked, Jian Chen and the Flame Mercenaries had subconsciously grown closer and became friendlier. But what was worth mentioning was that every single one of the members of the Flame Mercenaries were straightforward with their words, Captain Kendall included. All of them were quite emotional, and even though Jian Chen had revealed that he was a D-ranked mercenary, not a single one of them had held him in contempt or treated him badly. On this continent where power was the ultimate ruling power, people like this were extremely rare. And thus, Jian Chen's impression of the Flame Mercenaries had grown quickly. Unaware of the passage of time, the afternoon glow quickly came in as a knock on the door alerted everyone on the inside of visitors. That's definitely kobolds who is knocking. Hearing the knock, Xiao Dao revealed a happy smile as he went to open the door. As Jian Chen watched the door open, he wondered what the remaining two people of the Flame Mercenaries were like. The door opened as two plain-clothed people walked into the room. The first person looked to be around 30 years old with a relatively built stature that matched Jian Chen's own physique and eyes that shone just as bright. The one following behind was a person who resembled someone around Captain Kendall's age. While his face was rather ordinary-looking, the shine in his eyes were anything but ordinary. Kobolds, dear, you two finally came back. Captain Kendall laughed. Come, let me introduce you to Jian Chen here, who just recently joined our Flame Mercenaries. From this point on we are all brothers here, so it is important that we pay attention to one another. Kendall then turned to look at Jian Chen. Brother Jian Chen, the younger person is called Kobolds. Not only is he quite strong, but he is the most intelligent person within our Flame Mercenaries. Whatever action we considered on doing was suggested by Kobolds. The person next to him is Deer, who is similarly the strongest mercenary within our group after me, who is at the peak level Great Saint. I believe that in 3 years, he will make a breakthrough and become a Saint Master. Jian Chen cupped his hands in salute towards kobolds and deer as a sign of greeting and respect. Jian Chen, just by looking at you, I'm guessing you're around 20 years old, so I'm not quite sure how strong you are exactly. Kobold stared at Jian Chen with a calculative look and a curious tone. Jian Chen merely laughed without saying anything more before taking out his mercenary badge from within his space belt. It wasn't too long ago that I became a D-ranked mercenary. Oh. Kobolds nodded his head as he continued to stare at Jian Chen, his eyes revealing the curious glint that shone brightly. Then, he took his space belt and handed it towards Kendall. Uncle Kendall, I've already prepared everything we'll need for the operation tomorrow. Taking the space belt from Kobolds, Kendall said, That's good, then now that all the preparations for the trip is done, we will set out tomorrow morning. This time, we'll definitely hunt plenty of magical beasts. Brother Jian Chen, do you have any complaints? None, I will listen to Uncle Kendall. Jian Chen laughed. Alright, then everybody should rest up for today. Tomorrow will be another day to go all out. Leaving the house afterwards, Jian Chen began to stroll around Wake City by himself. In regards to the operation tomorrow, Jian Chen didn't care at all for it because with the flame mercenaries' strength, if they didn't want to die straight away, then they would first go hunt for Class 2 magical beasts. Although the flame mercenaries had 1 Saint Master and 4 Great Saints, they weren't able to compete with a Class 3 magical beast without trouble. So the flame mercenaries had no choice but to hunt for Class 2 magical beasts for now, but in Jian Chen's case, it could even be said that there was nothing that could pose a threat to him but a Class 4 magical beast. Even if he were to come across a Class 4 magical beast he couldn't beat, Jian Chen was confident in his ability to run away at the very least. Because of these reasons, Jian Chen did not feel any type of pressure on him about tomorrow's operation. After he had talked with the other mercenaries about what other supplies he would need, Jian Chen had already collected the majority of them and continued to stroll around Wake City. It had been over a month since Jian Chen had first come to Wake City, but the majority of his time was spent in the Magical Beast Mountain Range. He had only spent a few days inside a room, and even then, almost all of that time was spent cultivating. He didn't have any time to himself yet, so Jian Chen had wanted to take advantage of this free period to take a break. Even though Wake City wasn't an immensely huge city, it was still large in its own right. Even with its expansive iron wall that encircled the city, a person would be able to reach the west side from the east if they walked fast enough in a single day. Because of its close proximity to the Magical Beast Mountain Range, the borders of the city was always lively, so a third of the lands in Wake City were owned by restaurants and private personnel. Jian Chen continued to slowly stroll down the street and look at the many street vendors by the side. Many of these vendors were mercenaries, only a few of them were actual merchants. These stalls would hold many items, including herbal medicine, monster cores, and even toys for children. Yet, the majority of the monster cores sold here were Class 1 ones, with Class 2 cores rarely showing up. Because of this, Jian Chen did not have much of an interest in this. There were many magical beasts within the continent, but if a mercenary were to sell a monster core through a merchant they would only get 70% of market price. Because of this, many mercenaries would rather sell the items themselves since monster cores were always in high demand on the Tian Yuan continent anyways. Even then, many people would still hire mercenaries to go and kill magical beasts instead of going themselves. As Jian Chen enjoyed his leisurely walk, the azure and violet glow within his dantian began to pulse so wildly that it began to impact both his dantian and his body. Before, his dantian was like a still lake with not even a single ripple, but now, the lake had become a raging sea with waves threatening to drown anything in its path. Even with the use of his Saint Force, Jian Chen was unable to control this storm. Jian Chen's face changed as he realized that the azure and violet glow was no longer controllable. This was the worst-case scenario Jian Chen was afraid of. Although the two glows would generally float around within his dantian and take the majority of the energy within the monster cores, Jian Chen knew that sooner or later, these two glows would bring about a huge amount of trouble for him. And it seems that today was finally the day that the azure and violet glow would no longer stay peacefully within him. Chapter 107, The Strange White Stone Within Jian Chen's Dantian. The azure and violet glows were constantly flickering as they revolved around each other in a circle and emitted a bright light that could be seen by the naked eye. At the same time, he felt a strange sensation within his head as the azure and violet glows started to move as if they had a will of their own and possessed their own independent mind and life. To Jian Chen, it was almost as if the two glows were in a joyous mood. That's right, the feeling Jian Chen had felt was as if the azure and violet glows in his dantian were experiencing a great amount of joy and excitement. But Jian Chen was dumbfounded by this unbelievable conclusion. Even the look on Jian Chen's face could show the amount of disbelief he had. At the same time, another strange sensation entered Jian Chen's mind as if it came in out of thin air. From this sensation, Jian Chen realized that the two glows in his dantian had established some sort of subtle connection with an unknown thing. It was akin to a spiritual connection, but simultaneously, it also felt as if something was being locked away. Trying to restrain his emotions, Jian Chen took a deep breath and slowly turned his head towards where the sensation was at its strongest. His eyes landed upon a street stall, where a 30-year-old man was managing. In his stall was a pile of Class 1 monster cores and a few fantastic yet bizarre items. Jian Chen's eyes swept past the items one by one until it landed upon a fist-sized white stone. It was in a particularly peculiar shape and was completely white, but other than that, it was unremarkable. Compared to other white stones, this one didn't seem to be any different. Thanks to the unfathomable mystery that was the strange sensation, Jian Chen knew that it was this white stone that was causing such a stir within his dantian. The glows had some sort of a connection with this locked white stone, like a child would try to protect his most favorite treasure. The feeling of happiness was so strong, even Jian Chen was experiencing the sensation to a degree. On the surface, Jian Chen's expression didn't change at all, but the moment he reached the street stall, his hand reached out to grab the fist-sized white stone. But the moment his hand was about to pick it up, his face changed and let loose a surprised expression. It was because this fist-sized white stone was surprisingly heavy. The moment his hand made contact with it, the white stone did not move even a single centimeter. What a heavy stone! Jian Chen couldn't help but to exclaim. Using his entire hand to clasp the stone firmly into his hand, he began to exert even more energy, and finally, the stone began to slowly rise from the table. Honored customer, are you looking at this strange stone? The stall owner suddenly appeared next to Jian Chen with a smile. Jian Chen slowly brought the fist-sized stone to his attention and stared at it. While it was only the size of a fist, it had already reached a weight of over 50 kilograms. If it were not for the fact that Jian Chen was a middle great saint, picking up this stone in one hand would have been a strenuous task. But when he picked up the strange white stone, he could clearly sense the excitement and happiness emanating from within his dantian. However, Jian Chen was skeptical of this sensation because only beings that were given life would be able to experience these types of emotions. And yet, the two glows within his dantian were clearly giving off this sensation, so could it be that the azure and violet glow in his dantian actually had self-awareness? Perhaps they already had the ability to think for themselves. When Jian Chen reached this line of thought, his entire body shook and his forehead began to drip with sweat as he began to feel like he had no control over his fate now. He couldn't help but sigh as he thought about his dantian problem. There was truly no way out of this problem. He had no idea or method in regards to the two glows in his dantian as they were out of his control. Even if Jian Chen wanted those two glows gone from his dantian, there would be no way for him to accomplish it. AI, this is a blessing, not a curse, but also a curse I cannot escape from. It's best to forget about it since I've died once before. What else is there to care about? At worst, I'll just die again. Jian Chen said to himself. Continuing to look at the white stone in his hand, he thought about his dantian even more. The texture of this white stone was exceptionally unique. No matter how much Jian Chen looked at it, he wasn't able to tell if it was made out of stone or fine iron, as not only was it heavy, but its density was beyond normal. Sending his internal saint force through his arm, Jian Chen tried to have it enter the white stone, only to feel a strong resistance the moment the saint force made contact with it. It was as if the white stone was a defensive fort, and his saint force, the invader, wasn't able to make a dent in its defenses. The density of the white stone was extremely high, to the point that even Jian Chen was unable to use his saint force to enter it. Jian Chen tore his eyes away from the white stone and looked at the stall owner and asked, "I don't know what kind of stone this is, but what uses are there for it?" Hearing Jian Chen's question, the stall owner laughed in an embarrassed way. "Honored customer, to be truthful, even I don't know what this white stone is. Whatever it is used for, I don't know the answer to that either. But it is unusually heavy, so just after one look at it, one can tell that this white stone is no ordinary plaything." "Then where did you find such a thing like this?" Jian Chen's eyes shone as he continued to ask. Furrowing his eyebrows, the stall owner began to ponder the question before saying, "Honored customer, I've been asked that same question many times, but I've never told them. However, you seem quite favorable to me, so I'll tell you where I found this." The stall owner's voice stopped as he pointed at the white stone. "In all honesty, this white stone was found by me in the magical beast mountain range." "Oh." Hearing this answer, Jian Chen's eyes went back to the white stone once more. When he heard that the stall owner had picked up this item at the magical beast mountain range, it wasn't of any surprise to him. After all, there was always an opportunity anywhere for anyone. Even a farmer could stumble upon gold or another precious mineral while digging his farm. The stall owner looked at the interested face of Jian Chen and opened his mouth once more. "Honored customer, this white stone has been in my possession for many years now. If it were not for the fact that I am in need of money, then I wouldn't have put it out on display in the first place. Seeing you are quite interested in it, why don't you buy it?" Jian Chen looked at the white stone with one eye as he sized it up before looking back to the stall owner. "How much is this white stone?" His tone was especially flat. This white stone's very existence had caused many questions for him, so it was only right for him to buy it. Chapter 108, How much is it? This is, seeing the expression on Jian Chen's face, the stall owner had a look of hesitation. Although he knew that this white stone was not an ordinary item by any means, he still didn't know what use it had. In order to understand the history behind this white stone, he had dove into multiple books about ancient treasures, but found nothing. He had even asked many close friends only to come up empty-handed. So after thinking it over, he had finally set a concrete price for this white stone. It was a shame that on this Tianyuan continent, there weren't many people that knew about this strange white stone, nor did anyone ever show this much curiosity toward it. But for those who were still curious enough to buy it, the moment they heard the price, every single person had put down the stone and immediately left. For while the stall owner knew this stone wasn't regular, he didn't know its use, but he still wanted to sell it for a decent price. So the moment everyone heard his price for the stone, they didn't hesitate to drop the stone and forget about it. When Jian Chen had asked about the price for this white stone, the stall owner felt undecided once more. He was really in need of money right now, so it could be said that this white stone was his sole way of earning money. If he set the price too high, then he was afraid that this Jian Chen would drop the stone and walk away like the other customers, but if he set the price too low, then he would feel uneasy in his heart. So with the price in question, his heart and mind were in contradiction with each other and didn't know what price to give. After hesitating, the stall owner opened his mouth. "Honored customer, if you are really interested in this white stone, then please state your price for it." Hearing this, Jian Chen looked at the man with an amused smile. "This is obviously your item, so it's only right for the price to be decided by you. Why would you want me to name a price?" The stall owner became embarrassed as he listened to Jian Chen and laughed awkwardly. "Honored customer, it isn't that I'm unwilling to say the price, rather it's because I'm afraid that if I say a price, you'll be scared away. I've had many people express their interest in this white stone, but the moment they heard my price, they all put it down and left." "Oh, then how much do you think this white stone is worth?" Jian Chen asked with interest. He was already completely determined to buy this white stone regardless of the price or the true use of it. If it could provoke such a strong reaction from the azure and violet glow in his dantian, then this was no ordinary item. He couldn't say for sure, but this white stone could possibly solve the mystery about his dantian problems. So for that reason, Jian Chen was very determined to win this object. The stall owner bit his lip as he looked at Jian Chen. "Honored customer, if you are this adamant in buying the white stone, then I shall tell you the price. Look here, will this much do?" With that said, the stall owner held out 5 fingers on his hand as if to give Jian Chen a high five. Seeing this movement, Jian Chen couldn't help but have a joking expression on his face as he said uncertainly, "Could it be you're selling this for 50 gold coins?" Hearing this, the stall owner grew red in the face from the paltry amount, as if the amount Jian Chen had offered differed from his by thousands of coins. The stall owner sighed and spoke, "Honored customer, I will be straightforward with you and be clear. I want to sell this stone for 500 purple coins, do you still want it?" As he spoke, the stall owner's eyes stared at Jian Chen closely. "What? 500 purple coins? Are you joking?" Jian Chen cried out in shock as he looked at the stall owner in disbelief. The moment he had heard the words, "purple coin," Jian Chen's lips felt especially heavy. 500 purple coins was equivalent to 50,000 gold coins. The stall owner's face grew even redder as he understood the look on Jian Chen's face. He knew that 500 purple coins was a price that would not have any buyers. That is, honored customer, if you can offer up a price that I can agree to, then at the very least I can sell it to you," the stall owner said in an agonized tone. With this, Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath as he sized up the white stone in his hand with uncertainty. After a long time, Jian Chen finally made up his mind. "My highest price will be 100 purple coins, whether I buy it or not, it's up to you." With that, he stared at the stall owner with a heavy glance, but even he was quite nervous within his heart. Jian Chen was determined to get this white stone. If he could easily buy it here, then it would be for the best. Even then, 100 purple coins was not a small amount at all for a stall owner. Jian Chen had already seen what this 30-year-old stall owner was like. Since the stall owner had such a shrewd mind, there was no way Jian Chen could reveal how interested he was in the white stone. Otherwise, if the stall owner found out how much he wanted it, who knew how high the price would go up? Not only that, but Jian Chen wasn't willing to let others know how much money he had on him. If it was found out, then those with sinister purposes would possibly come track him down looking for trouble. Although, with his strength, he wasn't even afraid of enemies at the Saint Master level, but he wanted to avoid as much trouble as he possibly could. The moment the stall owner heard Jian Chen's offer of 100 purple coins, he grew happy but then immediately grew embarrassed. "Honored customer, could you possibly add a little more to that?" Jian Chen chuckled as he shook his head. Seeing the happy glint in the stall owner's eyes, Jian Chen understood what the man was thinking of. Seeing how Jian Chen wasn't going to go any higher with his price, the man looked a little disappointed. But after thinking it over while biting his lips, he nodded his head. "Okay, 100 purple coins it is, we have a deal." Taking out the 100 purple coins from within his space belt, Jian Chen slowly counted them out for the stall owner and then took the white stone for himself to store into his space belt before departing from the stall. Jian Chen had really wanted to study this strange white stone and its purpose, but in this busy street where people flowed like water in a river, this was not the best place for it. However, as Jian Chen left the area, 2 people had noticed him. These 2 people both looked to be 20 years old and both had a weak stature. "Xiao San, it looks as if we've stumbled across an easy target." The shriveled youth on the left watched Jian Chen leave the area as he spoke with an excited voice. The one called Xiao San nodded their head. "Right, that person doesn't seem too old, so his strength should be quite weak. Since he's also by himself, this is a good opportunity. Seeing him grab that many purple coins, I'm willing to bet that person will have more on him. Huang Ho Er, you go follow him while I go notify the rest." With that, Xiao San quickly disappeared into the crowd while Huang Hoer began to follow Jian Chen. Chapter 109, Robbery Encounter. Jian Chen continued to walk down the street after purchasing the white stone. Right now Jian Chen wasn't all that focused on researching the white stone. Instead, he was lazily strolling around the street just in case he would be lucky enough to find another treasure. However, what was strange for Jian Chen was that after he had bought the white stone, the azure and violet glow in his dantian had already calmed down. Although, Jian Chen no longer cared about the matter anymore and only wanted nighttime to come so that he could study the white stone. If he was lucky, he would be able to make a discovery and figure out how to solve the problem with his dantian. If he could resolve the problem with his dantian, then his cultivation rate would improve without any more problems. Although the azure and violet glows were constantly taking a huge amount of his cultivation, they had allowed Jian Chen to absorb the energy from the monster cores without being affected by the berserk element within them. His consumption rate was still far too large, and Jian Chen was worried about his cultivation. If it were up to him, Jian Chen would rather have his original cultivation speed. Even if he could no longer easily handle the berserk element in the monster cores, he would find a way to deal with them. He did not want a situation that he could not control, because to Jian Chen, the azure and violet glow was like a ticking time bomb. They could go off at any time, and although he would have a slower cultivation rate, he wouldn't need to worry about getting more monster cores every single day. Plus, the amount of energy he would absorb from the monster core would be more than the amount he was currently absorbing. A Class 3 monster core was already enough to support his cultivation for several days. It could even last him dozens of days before all of the energy was consumed. In that case, as long as Jian Chen spent an entire day hunting magical beasts or monster cores, it was enough for him to train for several months. As the amount of time spent on hunting magical beasts decreased, the amount of time spent on cultivating would increase. Based on his calculations, even if the azure and violet glows in his dantian were removed, they wouldn't have much of an impact on Jian Chen's overall cultivation speed. Jian Chen wandered around the busy streets aimlessly and stared at the various street stalls on the side. Occasionally he would walk into a random store and take a look around. After discovering this strange white stone, Jian Chen was now curious if he could find any other fantastical things while traveling up and down the market street. Perhaps if he was lucky, he would find yet another object that would stir attention within his dantian. It was unfortunate that while he was walking on the market, he did not see anything else of value. It seems that these items cannot be found so easily. Jian Chen sighed with disappointment. Seeing how the sky was already getting dark, he had lost interest in trying to find anything new. Jian Chen stared off in the distance as he gave a grim smile. Right now there's not enough time. After I take care of the people behind me, I'll go rest up at a restaurant. Then tomorrow I'll head out with everyone toward the magical beast mountain range. As he said that, Jian Chen looked around himself for a less populated alleyway to walk through. Afterward, Jian Chen walked through the alleyway slowly, almost as if he was still window shopping. Just the road he was now traveling on was a more isolated path where less people traveled. Once more crossing into another secluded alleyway, Jian Chen finally ended up in a completely isolated lane with a dead end that was 4 meters tall. Stopping where he stood, Jian Chen turned around to be greeted with an empty road. With a look of disdain, he spoke evenly, "Friends, you've walked so far with me already, could it be you're still unwilling to show yourself?" Not long after Jian Chen had spoke, a group of people walked out into the secluded lane. There was a dozen people around, with each person's age ranging from 20 to 30 years old. The oldest one of them looked to be around 40 years old. The moment the dozen people appeared, they began to spread out in formation and blocked up the entire width of the alley. Clearly, they didn't want to let Jian Chen leave the alley, but they didn't stop there. As they blocked up the alley, each person began to slowly walk toward Jian Chen while giving him an intense stare, making them look like fiends. Jian Chen could only smile as he watched the people approach. To him, these people were not fiendish looking at all. He could tell how strong they were with his spirit, so the exact strength of each of the people here was clear to him. Among the group, the weakest members hadn't even reached the saint level while 3 other members were at the great saint level. The biggest surprise was that the oldest member there was unexpectedly at the saint master level. Even the captain of the Flame Mercenaries, Captain Kendall, was weaker than this person by a single tier. This man was a middle saint master. This man was around 40 years old and wore a bluish-green robe. He had an exceptionally fierce expression on his face with his short hair swaying in the wind slightly. Right under his mouth was a large beard that was very predominant. Dear friends, after walking so far down the path with this one has to wonder what you are doing. Jian Qin said with a trace of a smile, but his tone was still flat. The eldest male with the power of a middle saint master stared fiercely at Jian Qin and growled, "So you knew we were here all along." Jian Qin crossed his arms in front of his chest with a smile. "Of course, you were following me so adamantly while traveling on the same road for so long, how would a person not notice?" Hearing Jian Qin, the elder man looked at Jian Qin with a sudden look of realization. "So it was like this, it would appear that we were too careless then." Then the man's face changed as his surprise look suddenly grew cold. "Kid, right now this road has been blocked by us. If you don't want to die, then hand over every single coin and item within your space belt. Otherwise, prepare yourself to die here. If you want the things within my possession, then let's see if you have the strength to do so," Jian Qin said impassively. However, with each passing word, his tone grew colder and colder. With that said, the elder man didn't bother to say anything else and instead waved his hand. "Everyone forward. Bring him down and whatever he has will be ours." The entire formation began to rush toward Jian Qin as they each brought out their saint weapons. For those who hadn't yet reached the saint level, there was a simple iron sword and shield in their hands as they charged fearlessly at him. Seeing the dozen people approach, Jian Qin sneered in disdain. Right as they got within 10 meters of him, he leapt into the air as if swallowed up by the sky. Both of his legs kicked off of the walls with an impressive amount of strength as he flew over the heads of the people below. As he flew toward the 40-year-old man, a familiar silver-colored sword appeared in his right hand as it then transformed into a silver streak of lightning. With a speed that was difficult for the naked eye to see, the sword stabbed at the middle-aged man's throat. After countless of improvements to his body, Jian Qin's body was relentlessly refined by the special properties of the Saint Force. So now his strength was far stronger than his previous life thanks to that same Saint Force, and even his speed had increased many times over. Even with such an ordinary-looking sword, its speed was so fast that even for a great saint it was hard to dodge. After all, if one wanted to increase their attack speed, they would need to use their Saint Force to enhance it, but this was a hard strain on the physical body. So thanks to Jian Qin's special body and fast swordplay, it was a better improvement to his previous life. Even compared to those on the Tian Yuan continent, aside from those who were stronger than Jian Qin, he was able to bypass the defenses of anyone at his strength level or below. If Jian Qin were to use his entire strength in his attacks, then no one at his level of strength would have an opportunity to retaliate and would have their throats stabbed before they knew it. Seeing Jian Qin charge at him so fiercely, the middle-aged man let out a sneer as he brought the huge axe up into the air. With both hands clasping the handle, a great amount of Saint Force was constantly flowing into his Saint weapon as he cried out loud and then chopped down at Jian Qin with all his might. Ding! The light wind sword and the axe made contact with each other, causing a large explosion to take place. Following the sound, a large vibration was inflicted onto the man with an intensity so strong, it had caused his legs to weaken and stumble back a step or two. His eyes widened in astonishment as he stared disbelievingly at his opponent. This was because the man at first did not take Jian Qin's action seriously. To him, Jian Qin was no more than a 20-year-old man who would possibly only have the strength of a saint at the most. Even if he was a genius, then he would be no higher than a primary great saint, so as far as he was concerned, a person like this was no match for his troops. After this exchange of blows, the man was shocked at this new discovery. Even though he hadn't placed too low of an importance on Jian Qin, this strength of his was far beyond his expectations. With this strength, the man estimated that Jian Chen was no weaker than he was. Jian Chen did a somersault in midair as he descended back down onto the ground. Dispersing the shock from the initial blow with ease, he didn't take a pause even after landing on the ground. Immediately charging toward the elder person once more, the light wind sword in his hand emitted a hazy glow of light that wrapped the entirety of the blade. To the naked eye, the sword looked as if it was a hazy silver ray of light as it shot toward the man's throat with a ridiculous speed. Chapter 110, Traveling to the Magical Beast Mountain Range, Good Approach. The 40-year-old man shouted. While brandishing his saint weapon without the slightest trace of fear, his face grew solemn as he slashed at Jian Chen. Ding ding ding. The previously quiet alley suddenly grew loud with the sounds of saint weapons clashing with each other as Jian Chen and the elderly man continued to battle it out between them. Even though he was a middle great saint fighting against a middle saint master, he had not yet fallen despite it being a fierce battle. Jian Chen was exceptionally nimble as he moved around his opponent like a demon. The light wind sword in his hand relentlessly flashed toward the man's larynx, and each time the man's axe blocked his strikes. From the start, Jian Chen's attacks were like tidal waves of blows that left almost no chance for the man to retaliate, but gradually, the tidal wave of blows had slowly evolved into a fierce storm of blades that caused the man to not have any opportunities to retaliate. To be accurate, it wasn't that the man was unable to retaliate. In actuality, it was that if he were to try to strike back, then he was afraid that his attack would miss Jian Chen, and he would get a sword through his throat for his troubles. The man's entire forehead was now dripping with perspiration as he continued to fight. He didn't think that this seemingly 20-year-old male would possess such a strong amount of strength at the middle saint level. Not only was he narrowly dodging the blows as is, but what made the man afraid the most was that this youth's sword play was far too quick. Not only was his speed fast enough to make anyone astonished, the amount of times he could strike was intimidating as well. Right now, there was a large amount of regret within the 40-year-old man's heart. If he had known about Jian Chen's strength earlier, then he wouldn't have come over to try and rob him. On the side of the alleyway, the other people stared sluggishly at the fierce battle between Jian Chen and their boss. Just like the other man, no one had thought that Jian Chen, who looked to be much younger than they were, would be able to contend against their boss in terms of strength. Despite having a dozen people, when they looked at this fight, they all knew that they would not be able to join in. If they were to rashly charge in, all they would accomplish would be a vain death. Even though they had 3 great saints, but even with the strength of the great saints, they were painfully aware that their boss was in a disadvantageous position thanks to Jian Chen's display of power. Since he could only block now, it could be said that the boss' life could be taken at any moment without trouble, and if they were to charge in, then they would be of no use. All of them knew that death would be the only thing awaiting them, since they knew that their speed was not enough to dodge the lightning-quick sword that belongs to Jian Chen. Jian Chen and the middle-aged man once again fought to another standstill, but the middle-aged man was still in a bad position. Jian Chen stared at the man impassively as his right arm lashed out, transforming the light wind sword into a ray of silver light that streaked toward the man's throat once more. In a flash, the sword approached the man's throat. In the history of their battle so far, this was the fastest sword stroke he had displayed. The middle-aged man's face lost all shades of color in fright. Against a sword as fast as this, he practically had lost any chance of dodging or blocking this movement. In the eyes of the 40-year-old man, this sword had already reached an inconceivable amount of speed, and could no longer be dodged by someone like him. So in an instant, the man's face had become deathly pale, but at the moment where his death was about to come to pass, the sword had reached the skin of his throat and stopped its momentum suddenly. At such a crucial moment like this, the light wind sword had stopped its forward thrust, only allowing the tip of the blade to touch the man's throat. Despite the tip of the light wind sword stopping at the skin of his throat, the man had suddenly felt that it was becoming extremely difficult to breathe. At the same time, he was feeling a very sharp point of pain from where the tip was touching against his throat, almost as if the sword had already pierced his throat. The middle-aged man stood lifelessly where he was. At this point, he was completely terrified of moving. He was afraid that if he were to make the slightest movement, Jian Chen would then relentlessly plunge his sword into his neck. So right now, the man's face was dripping with cold sweat. Swir. Swordsman, please spare my life. Any. Next time, this lowly one won't bother swordsman ever again. The man's words were filled with terror for Jian Chen, each word barely coming out stronger than a stutter. Right now, his life was at the mercy of Jian Chen, so the thought of having no face towards someone as young as Jian Chen wasn't a problem for him. To him, as long as he could keep his life, then even kneeling toward Jian Chen wouldn't be an impossible task. Jian Chen stared at the middle-aged man with a small sneer. Slowly bringing back his sword, he said emotionlessly, "My mood today is quite good, so I do not have a desire to kill anyone. You better behave yourself in the future and not let me catch you doing something like this." With the magical beast mountain range being so close by and your strength being decent enough, a few low-leveled magical beasts would be well in your capability to earn money. With that said, Jian Chen left the alleyway. Yes, we will definitely comply with swordsman's command. We will never do such a thing again. The middle-aged man said frantically. It was almost as if the man was completely compliant with Jian Chen's orders. The moment Jian Chen's shadow left the alleyway, the middle-aged man let out a long breath of air and wiped his forehead clean of his sweat. Thinking back to that fight of life or death for him, the man was absolutely terrified out of his wits. In that recent moment, his entire life was hanging by a thread, ready to be severed. Leaving the alleyway, Jian Chen cut back into the busy roads before walking into a nearby restaurant. During the night, Jian Chen sat down on his bed and began to study the white stone in his possession. What exactly is this item? It looks like a stone, but the material it's made from isn't like a stone at all. One could say it's made of iron, but at the same time, one cannot say that. Staring at the white stone in his hand, Jian Chen was full of doubt and misgivings about it. From the start, it was because of the azure and violet glow in his dantian that made him interested in this white stone. At the beginning, it was the azure and violet glow that had initially felt happy and excited, but the moment after he had bought the white stone, his dantian had once more reverted back to its quiet state. Even with the white stone in the palm of his hand, the twin glows were not at all attracted to it in any way now. Jian Chen himself did not have the slightest understanding of the history behind this white stone. Although he had the expansive library from Kargath Academy as his source of knowledge, he still did not have a single piece of information about it. Restlessly, Jian Chen continued to study the white stone for the rest of the day. Aside from knowing that this stone was exceptionally solid, there wasn't any other piece of information he could glean from it. Whether he used water to boil it or fire to burn it, the white stone didn't have a single reaction or change. With no other choice, Jian Chen stuffed the white stone back into his space belt. Observing the glows in his dantian once more, he noticed that it was as peaceful as ever, not having any of the previous excitement shown earlier in the day. While the two glows were housed within Jian Chen's dantian, he was completely unable to do anything about the two. He couldn't get up close with the dantian, and could only observe these mysterious things from afar. If he got any closer, then he would suffer a strong feedback that he couldn't yet break through. So for that reason, Jian Chen had decided that trying to get any closer to them in his dantian would be a forbidden action. AI. Jian Chen sighed. Once he had come to this conclusion, he didn't know if this was a blessing or a curse. That night, Jian Chen was not cultivating for once. Instead, he was sleeping in his bed. For the first time in 3 months since he had left Jessen Kingdom, this would be the first night he would be able to sleep. Sleeping was a good way to restore his spirit, and with his large amount of spirit, if he were to refrain from using the spirit sword or control the light saint force, then it would be possible for him to go for a few days and nights without sleep. Not only that, but if he were to cultivate, then his spirit would be slowly recovered. So for that reason, Jian Chen hadn't slept at all since there was no need for him to. The next morning, Jian Chen woke up and looked outside to see the early morning scenery. Taking in a fresh breath of morning air, he sighed, I haven't slept in months, so I nearly forgot how good sleeping was. Now that I have slept again, it really was very comfortable. Soon after, Jian Chen left the restaurant and rode a horse toward where Kendall was waiting for everyone. The flame mercenaries were again staying over at the same house as before. At that moment, 8 members of the flame mercenaries were still resting inside. Although they were a small mercenary group, they didn't have the funds to build a bigger house, so at the very least they could only afford a small house. Arriving at the house, Jian Chen tied his horse to a fixed fence post and prepared to knock on the door. Before he could knock, a weak-looking youth suddenly opened the door. The moment he saw Jian Chen, his eyes loosened in intensity as he backed away from the door. This was the second youngest member of the mercenary group, Xiao Dao. Jian Chen gave a small smile and said, Xiao Dao, are you planning to go out? Xiao Dao chuckled, I only just heard the sounds of a horse, so I thought it was you for sure. Opening the door, I see that I was right. Come in Jian Chen, everyone's already waiting for you. Chapter 111, Peaceful at last. Just as Jian Chen entered the house, he saw Captain Kendall sitting with the other members eating breakfast. On the table was a huge steaming plate of beef. Jian Chen, come and eat. Today we shall be hunting, so you need to eat your fill so that you can be full of energy when you're fighting against the magical beasts. Kendall motioned for Jian Chen to sit down next to him at the long table. Hoopa tore a piece of beef off and began to chew it. That's right, today we must eat until our stomachs are full. If we come across a strong magical beast, if we can't kill it, we can at least run away. Kendall looked at Hoopa with a disapproving look. Hoopa, do you really want us to come across a magical beast we cannot defeat? If we come across a class 4 magical beast that specializes in speed, then the lives of our group will be forfeited to the Magic Beast Mountain Range. Kendall, I'm not just full of hot air. We have to take this seriously, I know. While Class 4 magical beasts scare me, we aren't going to the depths of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, so we won't be seeing any Class 4 magical beasts there. Hoopa said. Sitting down on the table, Jian Chen took a piece of beef and chewed it with his mouth. Uncle Kendall, what Hoopa said isn't wrong. Class 4 magical beasts are generally within the depths of the mountain range. As long as we don't go too far in, then we won't see any. Jian Chen had spent a decent amount of time there, so he was familiar with the environment there. Something like that can't be guaranteed. Kendall's face grew serious as he looked around the table. Even though we're only going to be around the outskirts of the mountain range, no one should drop their guard. While the majority of Class 4 magical beasts reside in the depths of the mountain range, there are still a few exceptions. A few bored Class 4 magical beasts could chase a few weaker ones to the outskirts of the mountain range. Something like this can happen on the Tianyuan continent. This is not a rare occurrence, it has happened many times before. Jian Chen nodded his head at this. He agreed with Captain Kendall's words because he had read many times in books that strong magical beasts would occasionally come out of their usual place as a result of boredom. However, this didn't happen enough for it to be extremely probable. In Jian Chen's time in the Magical Beast Mountain Range, he had never met a Class 4 magical beast while on the outskirts of the mountain range, and even Class 3 magical beasts were rare there. This piece of information is something we all know, and while we haven't yet come across such an event, some others have. Alright, Kendall, stop talking about it, it makes everyone's heart feel heavy. If we really come across such an event, then it'll be our bad luck. Let's just eat for now and then hit the road. The next one to speak was the one who wasn't that much younger than Captain Kendall, as well as being one of the strongest mercenaries in the group, Deer. With the strength of a peak great saint, he was already close to becoming a saint master. The moment Deer spoke, everyone became calm once more and resumed eating from the plate of beef. In a flash, the platter of beef had quickly been wiped clean, leaving behind only bits and pieces. After the food was finished, everyone immediately set out on the road. Within their group of 10, only Jian Chen was riding on horseback while everyone else walked on foot. Jian Chen, when we get to the Magical Beast Mountain Range, what will you do about your horse? You can't possibly bring the horse in there. Kendall asked Jian Chen. Hearing Kendall, Jian Chen began to laugh as he patted the white mane of his horse. There's still 20 kilometers until we arrive at the mountain range. When we get there, I'll let the horse go. Xiao Dao immediately bounded forward when he heard what Jian Chen said and cried out, "That can't be, Jian Chen. Could it be you want to let the horse go free? You're wasting such a large amount of money." Jian Chen could only laugh and say, "If I'm letting it go, then why not let it have its freedom? On such a large continent, whether or not it can survive, it'll be up to its luck." Horses were the most common of animals on the continent as well as the most inferior and abundant type of transportation. Wild animals were also able to absorb the world essence and eat a few treasures to become magical beasts. Even these horses had the ability to become one. Jian Chen had once read that 100 years ago, there was a horse with the strength of a Class 5 magical beast, however, its potential was limited and its innate ability was lacking. Advancing in strength for them was a difficult path as well as a long one. Even though most of the people were walking on foot, the journey was progressing quickly. After 2 hours of traveling, everyone had finally reached the foot of the magical beast mountain range. Seeing the verdant plant life in front of him, Jian Chen disembarked from his horse and headed into the forest along with the group. The white horse stayed behind, but Jian Chen knew that after a while, it would leave by itself. From here on out, be careful everyone. Although the forests here have more wild animals than magical beasts, that doesn't mean we can drop our guards. Captain Kendall looked at everyone solemnly before continuing to say, "Dear, Hupa and I will walk in front of the group, Zhou Dekai, Zhou Shaokai and Chang Ning Feng will walk behind the group. The rest will be in between us 6. After that, the group maintained the position ordered by Kendall and moved onward. On the road, although many wild animals had attacked them, their strength was incomparable to the Class 1 magical beasts who were also not a threat to their group. After 6 hours, the flame mercenaries finally reached the other side of the forest and entered the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range where the Class 1 magical beasts resided. Captain Kendall, who was walking ahead of the group, twisted his head back and said to everyone, "Everyone prepare yourself to fight. From here on out, Class 1 and 2 magical beasts will be roaming around." However, even before Captain Kendall had warned everyone but Jian Chen had already long since prepared themselves for battle and stared around themselves intensely. The group continued to walk into the outskirts of the mountain range, but after walking for 4 hours, they had not seen a single magical beast. Within the group, Jian Chen continued to walk with his eyes flickering with indifference. With each step he took, he was already aware of every finite detail of the magical beast's activity around them. However, whenever a magical beast was hiding in the tall bushes 10 meters away from them, they would retreat. Not a single one would dare attack them, leaving Jian Chen to be perplexed beyond belief on why they were doing that. Could it be that the magical beasts have realized the strength of our group and don't want to die? Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together as he thought to himself. When he had been in the magical beast mountain range before, he had never come across such behavior. Unable to take it anymore, Jian Chen asked, "Uncle Kendall, do you not feel as if something is wrong?" Jian Chen's question had been heard by the sensitive ears of everyone in the group. The entire group turned around to look at him as Kendall asked, "Jian Chen, what exactly is wrong here?" Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before saying, "This place is where Class 1 magical beasts roam about, so why is it we have not come across a single one yet?" Upon hearing this, everyone let loose a relieved breath of air. They had thought that Jian Chen actually had something in mind that was related to an unfavorable event. Kendall laughed and said, "Jian Chen, this is actually very common. Although this is the roaming grounds for Class 1 magical beasts, but the magical beast mountain range is vast, and this is only just one of the many roads. Not coming across a magical beast isn't rare, every single time we've entered here in the past it has been like this." Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together even more. In his heart, he knew that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. "Captain Kendall, could it be that you've never come across a Class 1 magical beast yet?" Jian Chen asked. "It's not that, we just merely don't see one often." The majority of the beasts that appear are Class 2 and 3. Of course, there are times where we don't see a single Class 1 magical beast at all. He answered Jian Chen's questions patiently. Captain Kendall, then on average, how many monster cores do you usually get? Jian Chen asked. Not too few. Captain Kendall thought about it before saying, on average, we can get 4 or 5 Class 2 monster cores in a single day, and maybe 6 or 7 if our luck is good. Class 3 monster cores will be less since Class 3 magical beasts don't roam around here as often. So the chances of seeing one are slim, and since Class 3 magical beasts are hard to kill as well, it'll be difficult for us to avoid any injuries. For that reason, if we come across any Class 3 magical beast, we try not to provoke it. Kendall paused for a moment before saying, when Deer makes a breakthrough to a Saint Master, then with our combined strength, it will be easy to kill a Class 3 magical beast. However, until Deer becomes a Saint Master, we need to do our best and avoid Class 3 magical beasts. Although Class 3 monster cores sell for a higher price than Class 2 monster cores, I don't wish to see any casualties. If we get a little bit more money in exchange for our lives, what use would that be? Chapter 112, Fighting the Black Tiger. Hearing Captain Kendall, Jian Chen nodded his head in approval. His impression of Kendall had once more grown. The evil in Kendall's heart was no more than Jian Chen's own in his previous life. With a selfless attitude like that, no person would refuse to lay down their lives for such a captain. Most importantly, with the captain's strength of a primary Saint Master, although he couldn't kill a Class 3 magical beast by himself, he could at least give Class 2 magical beasts a hard time. It was a shame that he didn't fight Class 2 magical beasts by himself. If he did, his profits would be much higher. To join with saints and great saints to hunt and kill magical beasts, although the profit distribution was merit-based, his own profits would still be many times smaller than going solo. In fact, the difference would be so huge that it wouldn't even be half the amount of what he could get by himself. With hearing just this bit, Jian Chen truly admired Captain Kendall. However, when it came to Captain Kendall and the amount of profit they earned in the magical beast forest in the past, he was shocked into silence. With the captain being of the Saint Master level and 5 other members being great saints, it was truly a pathetic amount of monster cores that they earned. Jian Chen just couldn't believe it. When he had gone solo within the magical beast mountain range, in the span of a day, he had collected at least 20 Class 2 magical beast cores. Even Class 3 monster cores had numbered around a dozen. Compared to what the flame mercenaries got, the difference between the two truly could not be compared. At that moment, Jian Chen's ear trembled slightly as he turned his head to look at the tall grass nearby. Inside, he could sense the movement of a magical beast moving about from 10 meters away. However, this magical beast was barely making any movements, so even Captain Kendall wasn't able to detect its presence. The magical beast paused for a moment, as if it were hesitating before it decided if it wanted to attack the group Jian Chen was in. In the end, it silently retreated. Sensing the magical beast's retreat, Jian Chen's mind was filled with doubt. What's happening? Could it be that the magical beasts have recognized the strength of our group and realized that its own strength was only enough to send itself to its death? Jian Chen wondered, but as he thought about that, another question came into his mind. With the magical beast being so low in strength, how could it possibly have the knowledge to make such a decision? When Jian Chen had traveled to the magical beast mountain range, no matter if it was a Class 1 or 2 magical beast, or even a Class 3 magical beast, they would scurry out of their hiding spots to attack him. Even if they were in a hidden area, they would try to make a sneak attack, making this situation a lot more different than what Jian Chen was expecting. Just what is going on? Could it be our group has too many people in it? That could be why the magical beasts aren't attacking. Jian Chen looked backward with a doubtful look. On this single road, he had only seen the traces of a single magical beast. At that moment, a black blur came rushing out of the tall grass toward Captain Kendall, who was at the front of the group. Everyone had already prepared themselves for this situation. So the moment the black blur came into view, it had already been spotted by Kendall and Deer. Looking at the incoming target, Kendall laughed and cried out, one finally came. A large axe sharp enough to cut the air around it appeared in his hand. With a fluid motion, the axe was swung in a downward motion toward the black blur. When Kendall had begun to attack, Deer stood behind him with his broadsword out and ready to swing. Ding! Kendall's axe and the black blur made contact in midair, creating a large explosion of sound. The black blur came to a grinding halt as the axe was sent recoiling backward. The black blur flew backwards into the air for 5 meters before landing back down on the ground. The moment it touched the ground, every single member of the group got to see what had just attacked them. It was a tiger whose mane was completely black. Both paws had many sharpened claws, while some of them had even looked to be stained with blood. Brothers, surround it. Kendall called out before grabbing his axe to once more attack the black tiger. Hoopa, Chang Ning Feng and the 2 Zhou twins encircled the black tiger in all 4 directions in order to prevent it from getting away. Deer, who had the power of a great saint, entered the circular ring and began to fight it with Kendall. This black tiger was only a class 2 magical beast, and with a saint master and a peak great saint fighting it, this black tiger didn't have a chance of surviving. In a flash, the black tiger's body was filled with wounds as blood flowed freely from it. As a result, its normally black body was dyed red. Jian Chen, Xiao Dao, and Yun Xian stood and watched the battle from afar. While the magical beast had a natural superiority in instincts, this was only a class 2 magical beast that was no match for a great saint. So for this battle, Xiao Dao and the other 2 saints were unable to intervene without fear of risking a serious injury. Watching Kendall and Deer fight it out, Xiao Dao was very eager to join in on the fight. Observing the 2 fight with the black tiger, Xiao Dao looked as if he had wanted nothing more than to reincarnate into Kendall and fight against the black tiger for a countless number of rounds. I have to work hard and cultivate so that I can become a saint master quickly. This way, I can hunt and kill class 2 magical beasts by myself. Xiao Dao remarked as he bit his lips in determination. Hearing this, Yun Xian who was standing by his side laughed and said, Xiao Dao, your strength right now should be at the middle saint, so it's still far in the future until you become a saint master. With your cultivation talent, you should be around 40 years old before you become a saint master, if not older. 40 years old, so what? Didn't Captain become a saint master at that age? Either way, I'll eventually reach the saint master level. Xiao Dao replied in a slightly dissatisfied tone. With a yearning expression reflected in his gaze, he muttered, wait until I gain the strength of a saint master. Then I can adventure around Magical Beast Mountain Range alone, and fight the magical beasts at close quarters, one-on-one. It will be an impressive sight. Seeing Xiao Dao's expression of yearning, Yun Xian grudgingly shook his head and inwardly whispered to himself, are saint masters that amazing? All they do is bully class 2 magical beasts. You think that a saint master's strength is enough for them to rampage around Magical Beast Mountain Range without fear? Yun Xian turned around to look at Jian Chen as he said, hey, Jian Chen, how many times have you entered Magical Beast Mountain Range? You're so small, could it be that it's only your first time? Jian Chen indifferently replied, this should be my second time. Although Jian Chen had entered the forest at Kargath Academy and killed magical beasts there in the past, that experience couldn't possibly count formally. In addition, the magical beasts there had been raised by the academy, so Jian Chen simply ignored that experience. Yun Xian's eyes lit up. He immediately showed interest and impatiently asked, then how many people were with you when you first entered? How powerful were they? Did you have any experts as formidable as Kendall? Jian Chen turned around to eye Yun Xian. After hesitating for a bit, he said, the first time I entered the Magical Beast Mountain Range, I was alone. However, before Jian Chen had even finished speaking, he was interrupted by Yun Xian. What, you entered Magical Beast Mountain Range alone your first time? Wow, Jian Chen, I really look up to you. Jian Chen bitterly smiled and replied, Yun Xian, there's no need to speak so loudly. When I had entered Magical Beast Mountain Range alone my first trip, I had only wandered around the surrounding areas. Yun Xian looked at Jian Chen with an expression of admiration and said, Jian Chen, I really respect you, especially your courage. You are really bold. Could it be that you didn't know that even the surrounding areas of Magical Beast Mountain Range are extremely dangerous? Encountering a Class 1 magical beast is fine. If you can't beat it, there's still a chance to flee. But if you meet a Class 2 magical beast, then your young life would be finished on the spot. Yun Xian patted his chest and he said with a trace of lingering fear, however, a youngster like you was extremely fortunate to not have met such magical beasts. Otherwise, you most likely would have been doomed. That's right, Jian Chen. From now, you mustn't come to the Magical Beast Mountain Range alone. Although our journey so far has been very tranquil, you definitely cannot underestimate the Magical Beast Forest just because of that. Xiao Dao said solemnly, his expression serious. Jian Chen bitterly smiled at the two's words and replied, All right, I understand. For now, let's just go back to watching Captain's fight with Black Tiger. Watching this scene is really beneficial for you guys. You can at least learn some battle patterns, they would be pretty useful later on. Kobold stood by Jian Chen's side, his shocked gaze locked onto Jian Chen. He surveyed Jian Chen's body up and down a few times, and his eyes flashed brightly with an expression of indefinite bewilderment. However, he didn't say a word, and quietly stood there, motionless and silent. Hearing Jian Chen's words, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian really did stop talking, and returned their attention to the fight and concentrated on what was happening in front of them. Kendall and Deer continued to fight the Black Tiger for about the same amount of time it took for a cup of tea to be made. While the entire body of the Black Tiger was filled with wounds and blood, the combatants had finally brought out the true extent of the tiger's ferocity. With its life on the line, the Black Tiger's strength didn't falter at all and began to dodge the moves of the humans nimbly. With each dodge, it tried to strike back at Kendall and Deer. Chapter 113, A Reveal of Strength, Ha! Kendall shouted. The large axe made of his Saint Force swung behind him in a motion to chop off the head of the Black Tiger. The Black Tiger dodged the battle axe by leaping into the air toward Kendall. Extending its jaws, the Black Tiger prepared to bite down onto him. Immediately bringing back the battle axe, Kendall brought his Saint weapon up to defend himself, allowing the Black Tiger to make contact with that instead. The sharp fangs of the Black Tiger made contact with the hardened weapon with a crunching sound. The force of the impact was so strong that Kendall couldn't help but stagger back a few steps as trail marks were left on the ground. Not too long after, the paws of the Black Tiger landed on the ground. Before Kendall could regain his composure, the sharp claws of the tiger slashed at Kendall's chest. Kendall became alarmed at the speed of the claws. With his axe being bitten and held down by the tiger, it was useless in this case. At this crucial moment, Kendall sucked in a deep breath and readied his body. At the same time, the Black Tiger's sharp claws slashed across his chest with a cold ripping sound as his clothes were ripped apart. Along with his clothes, Kendall's blood splattered into the air as the claws made contact. This time, although Captain Kendall had taken the claws to his chest head-on since there wasn't enough time to dodge, it was only a superficial wound. He had been worried that the claws would have brought out a larger amount of damage, but this didn't seem to be the case. Just as the Black Tiger raked its claws across Kendall's chest, a large broadsword chopped down onto the tiger's back with a ferocious amount of force. As the sword met the tiger's back, a large wound could be seen, but thanks to the resilience of the tiger, the wound was only the size of a palm in length. As he watched the fight with the Black Tiger, Jian Chen shook his head helplessly. In his eyes, whether it was Kendall or Deer, neither of the two had shown their superiority with their weapons. Just looking at how they held the weapon, it was almost as if they didn't know how to use them. They had swung wildly without any sort of form or discipline. It was Deer who had annoyed Jian Chen the most. Every single weapon had its own characteristics and special pattern of attack. Deer didn't know how to use a sword at all, so the sword in his hand wasn't able to show off its true power. Deer had even unexpectedly at times used the sword like a knife and recklessly chopped at his enemy. As the battle continued, Captain Kendall and Deer had accumulated a few tiny wounds. At the same time, the black tiger suddenly faced the skies and released a roar that shook the heavens, destroying the silent atmosphere of the magical Beast Mountain range. Right after the shout, the black tiger suddenly released another few strikes before dodging both fighters and turning around to run away. Careful, it wants to run. Block it, for the love of everything don't let it run away. Standing where the black tiger was attempting to run away to was Chang Ning Feng. Seeing the incoming magical beast, the glint in his eyes never stopped as he brought out his sword in front of him. With a large amount of saint force focused into his sword, he stabbed at the black tiger. At such a crucial moment like this, he had to make sure he focused everything on this one strike in order to avoid a long and drawn-out battle. While Chang Ning Feng moved to initiate combat, the other mercenaries weren't idle. Kendall and Deer quickly ran forward to attack the black tiger from behind. Ho! The black tiger emitted another deep growl as it lashed out with its claws once more. Its front paws smashed into Chang Ning Feng's sword, causing it to shake from the strong force. Afterward, the black tiger opened its mouth wide and snapped at Chang Ning Feng. Chang Ning Feng retreated backward while his sword went up ready to parry. Instead, he stabbed at the incoming bite. Ding! Although the sword did not penetrate the black tiger's mouth, it had swiped against the fangs of the beast as it reared its head backward. Biting down on the sword, the tiger had prevented Chang Ning Feng from pulling his sword out and fighting with it. Bastard, go die! At this moment, a loud sound came from behind the black tiger. It was Captain Kendall who had quickly approached it from behind with his large axe raised high into the air, emitting a loud sound as it chopped down onto the tiger's back. At the same time, Deer and a few other saints began to approach the tiger from Chang Ning Feng's side and tried to obstruct the black tiger. The black tiger released its hold on the sword as it turned to face Captain Kendall behind it with his axe raised. Dodging his axe swiftly, the black tiger did not manage to come out unscathed as the axe clipped its body and cut away a patch of fur. Ayo! The black tiger let out a pain-filled roar as it turned around and sped off in the opposite direction. However, just as it began to run, Jian Chen and the others saw that it was heading toward them, leaving them no choice but to take part in the fight. Seeing the direction the black tiger was going, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian's face changed drastically as they cried out in shock and turned toward the side to escape from it. Kobolds was the first to avoid the black tiger with an extremely fast speed, running far away. Soon, it was only Jian Chen who stood his ground by himself without a single trace of fear on his face. Jian Chen, dodge quickly! Kendall yelled out before dashing forward in an attempt to block off the black tiger from its path. However, even with his Saint Master strength, his speed wasn't enough to catch up with the Class 2 magical beast. Seeing Jian Chen block its path, the black tiger's eyes grew crimson as it released another roar. Quickly afterward, it increased its speed toward Jian Chen. Seeing how Jian Chen stood his ground without any consideration of moving, the members of the Flame Mercenaries could only cry out in regret as they watched the scene unfold before them. In regards to Jian Chen's strength, everyone had only thought that he had the strength of a saint. If a great saint had difficulties fighting this black tiger, then a saint would definitely have no chance of resisting it. Even though the black tiger had already sustained plenty of wounds, the serious state it was in had aroused its ferocious nature. Its fighting strength hadn't taken a decrease in intensity, instead, it had only grown stronger. Seeing the black tiger pounce toward him, Jian Chen's previously dull expression suddenly flashed with a cold light. His 2 fingers wide and 1.33-meter-long silver light wind sword abruptly appeared in his right hand. The only thing that could be seen was a silver light flashing in front of the black tiger. At the same time, Jian Chen's body also whirled around, leaning toward the side, about 1 step away from where he had previously been standing. Pang! The black tiger's enormous and cumbersome body heavily fell to the ground where Jian Chen originally had stood. Its body showed no signs of movement at all. The next instant, Crimson blood began to rush out of the black tiger's neck, and gradually pour over the uneven ground, spreading in all directions. Just as he was swiftly charging forward, Captain Kendall's advancement was abruptly halted. He stared blankly at the black tiger that was now motionless on the ground. Kendall quietly stood in his tracks as he looked at Jian Chen, who stood there with an unchanged expression. Kendall's eyes were filled with astonishment and incredulity. He had just seen an unimaginably fast, blurred figure of a sword flash before the black tiger's eyes at an insane speed. Right after, the black tiger had collapsed to the ground, completely still. Captain Kendall's gaze finally fell onto the 2 fingers wide silver sword in Jian Chen's hand. He noticed that there wasn't a single trace of blood dirtying the glossy and dazzling blade. Yet it was because of this that Kendall felt even more shocked. In the short instant he looked at Jian Chen, his gaze changed countless times, from doubt to amazement, from disbelief to shock, the emotions flickering through his eyes one after another. At that moment, the remaining 5 saints finally rushed over. They hadn't yet discovered that the black tiger was already dead. The 5 of them charged forward and surrounded the black tiger, and they immediately began to strike toward the black tiger's body with their saint weapons in their hands. This magical beast has already died. Everyone, there's no need to fight it anymore. Just as the 5 mercenaries were about to pierce the black tiger's body, Captain Kendall's slightly trembling voice rang out. Hearing this, the 5 great saints all had blank looks on their faces. The saint that had just struck downward had also forcibly stopped his movement midair. Immediately afterward, the 5 people's gazes all shifted in unison to the black tiger's body that had fallen before them, closely inspecting it. Only now did the 5 people clearly see that there was fresh blood violently spurting out of the black tiger's neck. The black tiger's red eyes that had originally held a fierce and terrible glint had now become spiritless voids. Strange, how did this black tiger die? Wasn't it jumping around healthy and alive just a second ago? How did it suddenly die? Hoopa asked in confusion. Hearing this, the remaining 4 great saints all glanced at each other with doubtful expressions. Captain Kendall stared long and hard at Jian Chen and said, "This black tiger was killed by Jian Chen." "What? Jian Chen killed it? Captain, are you serious?" Hearing Captain Kendall's words, Xiao Dao jumped up, and one could tell from his expression that he wasn't quite convinced. Xiao Dao wasn't the only one having difficulty accepting this. Everyone in the Raging Flames mercenary group had expressions of disbelief on their faces after hearing those words. Chapter 114, Zhou Mercenaries. Everyone in the Flame Mercenaries had thought that Jian Chen's strength was of the saint level. Even his mercenary badge had declared him to be a D-ranked mercenary, and the most important factor was that Jian Chen was so young as well. On the Tianyuan continent, if a 20-year-old was able to become a saint, then their strength was bright and their potential was unimaginable. For a seemingly 20-year-old like Jian Chen who was capable of killing a Class 2 magical beast, even if it was injured, no one in the proximity would have been able to believe it if they hadn't seen it. However, aside from Captain Kendall, no one saw the faint hazy outline of the sword, or how Jian Chen had killed the black tiger. Kendall's eyes wavered on the slender sword of Jian Chen's for a moment before growing calm once more and laughed. "If you guys don't believe it, then go ask Jian Chen yourself." There was a smile on his face as he said this, but how could he not be happy? There was one more expert in his group now. Xiao Dao was the first to give in. Running up to Jian Chen while looking at him from up to down, his eyes finally settled onto the blood-free light wind sword. "Jian Chen, please tell me honestly, did you kill the black tiger?" Seeing the look of disbelief on Xiao Dao's face, Jian Chen nodded his head and said, "That's correct, I killed it." From the very beginning, Jian Chen hadn't planned on hiding his strength with lies, so he was very straightforward and honest with Xiao Dao. "Wow, no way." Xiao Dao's eyes widened in surprise. In disbelief, Xiao Dao looked at the calm Jian Chen and spoke, "This fierce Class 2 magical beast was really killed by you. How did you do that and how come I didn't see how you did it?" Hearing Xiao Dao ask these questions, everyone but Kendall stared at Jian Chen attentively. Whatever method Jian Chen had used to kill the Class 2 magical beast, it was natural for them all to be curious. To them, all they saw was Jian Chen suddenly move to the side while using his thin and slender sword in a strange way to kill the black tiger, but none of them had figured out how or what method was used. In the midst of everyone, there was only one person who looked at Jian Chen differently. It was Kobolds, who stared at Jian Chen in a way that looked as if to say to himself, "It was just as I thought." Jian Chen let a grim smile take hold of his lips as he raised his light wind sword. "I used my saint weapon to kill the beast. If you guys didn't see it, it's because my movements were too fast to catch." Hearing what Jian Chen said, Captain Kendall thought back to the flash of silver he had just seen and couldn't help but be afraid. This was because he had no choice but to admit that Jian Chen's sword was just far too quick and he could only see the faint afterimage of the sword. At this moment, Capital Kendall couldn't help but think, if he were to battle an opponent who possessed such speed, would he be able to dodge their attacks? Chang Ning Feng looked at the corpse of the black tiger below and kicked it. The body of the black tiger flipped over by his kick before he bent down to grab the black tiger's head to reveal the cut on its neck. As everyone saw the fatal blow on the black tiger's neck, even Captain Kendall couldn't help but take in a sharp breath because the wound was way too deep. Just looking at the neck, one could see that 2/3 of it had been completely cut off. Only 1/3 of the skin was attached to the rest of the body, making it seem as if the head of the black tiger was about to snap off at any moment. What was even more unimaginable was that the black tiger had clearly leapt toward him so fast that it looked as if it was gliding. For Jian Chen to accurately deliver a fatal blow to its throat, this was an act of skill no one else in the group could match. Deer took in a deep breath of air to calm his beating heart as he looked at Jian Chen. With a smile, he said, "Jian Chen, before we had only thought that you were a saint, but it seems like your strength was far beyond our imagination. You really did keep us in the dark." Hoopa walked on over to Jian Chen and extended his hand onto Jian Chen's shoulder. "Jian Chen, you are far too mean. Be honest with me. How strong are you? You can't be even more amazing than our captain, right?" Hearing what Hoopa said, Jian Chen could only laugh helplessly. "Brother Hoopa, I'm nowhere as amazing as you say. My strength isn't too far away from yours. I am a middle great saint." "That's not right. How could a middle great saint kill a Class 2 magical beast so easily?" Hoopa said with surprise, but instead of asking Jian Chen, he turned around to talk to everyone else. "First, let's take care of the body of the black tiger before we continue talking about this." Even as they obeyed Hoopa's command, everyone was still doubtful. However, they didn't say anything and started to prepare the black tiger. This black tiger was quite amazing. Even though it had the strength of a Class 2 magical beast, it was faster than a Class 3 magical beast. After taking the monster core, put the rest of the body within a space belt so we can sell it for a great amount of money," Kendall said. On the Tian Yuan continent, with regards to the type of meat consumed, other than regular beef, most of them came from magical beasts. Magical beast meat was not only tender, but it even smelled good too. Another good benefit was that eating it would also help reinforce the body, thus magical beast meat were considered a hot-selling item. When it came to high-leveled magical beasts, the supply could never meet the demand. Jian Chen absorbed the light wind sword back into his body and watched as the mercenaries stored away the body of the black tiger. He didn't care that it was a Class 2 magical beast since he could easily kill a Class 3 magical beast at any time. In the hands of Jian Chen, the magical beasts had no way of escaping. The flame mercenaries were different. They had only one Saint Master. Even with their strengths combined, they couldn't be compared to Jian Chen. Killing a peak Class 2 magical beast had been difficult for them, and if it weren't for the fact that Jian Chen had blocked the black tiger, they wouldn't have been able to catch up to it. These magical beasts could be said to be like fish in water, different from humans. Their movements wouldn't be restricted by the lush forest environment. Jian Chen's ears trembled once more and he turned his head to the side. As his eyes landed on top of a few bushes that started to shake violently, a group of 20 mercenaries wearing steel helmets and full-body armor walked into their line of sight. Just as the fully armed mercenaries walked into their sights, everyone in the Flame Mercenaries immediately stopped what they were doing and watched the 20 mercenaries with a tense expression. The leader of the 20 mercenaries looked at the Flame Mercenaries with a cold glare and then at the halfway stored Black Tiger. With a wave of his hands, he barked out, "Onward," commanding the rest of the mercenaries to walk past the Flame Mercenaries without looking back before finally melting out of sight. In the group's eyes, the Flame Mercenaries weren't even worth a glance. Those were the Zhou mercenaries. I didn't think we'd come across them here. After the iron-clad mercenaries left, Hoopa let out a breath of air. "Brother Hoopa, are the Zhou mercenaries that well known?" Jian Chen asked. Hoopa nodded his head in response. While the Zhou mercenaries aren't considered the strongest in Wake City, the residents of Wake City will say that the Zhou mercenaries are for sure within the top 10. Their group has around 50 people with their leader at the peak Saint Master level. Under his direct command are 6 middle Saint Masters with around 20 great saints. Their strength is so enormous that our Flame Mercenaries definitely cannot provoke them. Plus, the Zhou mercenaries have the backing of one of the strongest clans in Wake City, the Zhou clan. With this, there aren't many in Wake City that could challenge them. Oh. Jian Chen looked to where the Zhou mercenaries disappeared to, their image not disappearing from his mind. Jian Chen, if you come across such a person or group in the Magical Beast Mountain Range in the future, please be careful. The Magical Beast Mountain Range is a common place for people to be killed over their items. There are even some people who are mercenaries, but their actions place them on the same level as a bandit. Kendall warned Jian Chen with a serious and grave face. Seeing how serious Kendall was, Jian Chen nodded his head, "I'll be careful." After that, the Black Tiger's corpse had been properly stored within a space belt. Right now we are in an area where Class 2 magical beasts roam. Any deeper and Class 3 magical beasts will be found. So for our sake, let's start to wander around here. Soon after, Kendall and Deer began to address their wounds, which were thankfully not very deep and wouldn't affect their fighting strength by too much. With a little preparation, the two were ready to get back on the road while staying vigilant of their surroundings. After traveling a short distance, Jian Chen had detected the footprints of another magical beast, but this time it was just like the magical beast before the Black Tiger. This magical beast was using the cover of the forest to hide 10 meters away from the mercenaries before silently retreating. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together as he tried to understand just what was happening. On the road, aside from killing that one Class 2 magical beast Black Tiger, he had detected the presence of at least 10 different magical beasts, but none of them had been like the Black Tiger and attacked them. Could it be that it's because there are too many people that the magical beasts are afraid to attack us? Jian Chen asked himself. However, this thought was immediately dismissed, for it made no sense at all. Chapter 115. A generous prophet. Jian Chen stared at the mercenaries walking in front of him when a flash of realization came. Of course, it's intimidation. This has to be due to the murderous air we're emitting. Jian Chen's eyes sparkled as he came to this realization. After seeing so many magical beasts retreat without a fight from this group, it had, after all, been because the entire group was releasing an intimidating amount of killing intent into the air around them. Although the magical beasts lacked wisdom, they were born with superior genetics that granted them formidable instincts. The moment they sensed an opponent they wouldn't be able to beat, their primal instincts would urge them to immediately cower and run away. Thinking about this, Jian Chen opened his mouth. "One moment please, everyone suppress your killing intent. Otherwise, we'll just continue about this path without seeing another magical beast." Kendall turned his head in the manner of a fox as he asked, "Jian Chen, is that useful?" "Whether it's useful or not will be known after everyone tries it for themselves." Jian Chen didn't want to bother to explain. Hearing what Jian Chen had said, Kobolds began to think to himself for a moment as the glint in his eye grew brighter and brighter. Everyone should believe in Jian Chen for now. These past few times we entered the magical beast forest we would always come across only a few Class 1 magical beasts. I had always found this to be strange, but until now, I hadn't an answer for it, so we can't outrule what Jian Chen has said here. So even kobolds would say something like this. Then let's follow Jian Chen's suggestion, said the elder of the Zhou twins. Kobolds had only the strength of a saint, but he was extremely smart. His past suggestions had been of great benefit to the flame mercenaries before, so everyone would readily agree with what he said. After a while, everyone had slowly started to suppress their killing intent to the point where not even a small amount could be felt leaking out. Just as everyone finished suppressing their killing intent, they barely traveled 3 kilometers, before a Class 1 magical beast appeared. This made every single member of the Flame Mercenaries happy at the new change of events. Although a Class 1 monster core was worth less than a Class 2 monster core, killing a Class 1 magical beast was an easy task. As long as there were Class 1 magical beasts, the road ahead of them would be filled with generous profit. So we finally came across a Class 1 magical beast. Captain Kendall, please allow me, kobolds and Yun Xian to deal with this one. Xiao Dao cried out in joy as a small dagger appeared in his hand. Striking at the magical beast, kobolds and Yun Xian followed behind quickly. Seeing the small knife in Xiao Dao's hand, Jian Chen shook his head in exasperation. No wonder he was called Xiao Dao, it was because his saint weapon had been a tiny blade. Turning his gaze over to kobolds and Yun Xian, both wielded a two-handed sword. After a while of the three fighting it at such a dangerously close distance, the cooperation of the 3 mercenaries finally killed the magical beast. None of the great saints like Jian Chen had any desire to join in on the fight, since all of them had fully believed that the 3 saints would be able to take care of the Class 1 magical beast. Continuing onward, the group couldn't walk for long without coming across a few Class 1 and even some Class 2 magical beasts. But this type of outcome had proved to everyone how Jian Chen's theory was true. By nightfall, the group had found a place to rest in and prepared a big campfire. While eating the meat from a magical beast for dinner, they had begun to tidy up the profits they had earned today. Sitting in front of the campfire was Captain Kendall, who watched the flames flicker and dance with a smile as a pile of monster cores sat next to him. Everyone, right now let's talk about today's harvest. Kendall laughed as he looked around himself. Today, we earned a total of 20 monster cores, 7 Class 2 monster cores and 13 Class 1 monster cores, making our profits exceed far more than in the past. At the last few words, Kendall had practically yelled it out, making it clear that he was beyond excited. We have to thank Jian Chen for this. If it weren't for his advice, we wouldn't have come across even a single Class 1 magical beast. Hoopa laughed as he took a drink of his wine. Chang Ning Feng laughed as well. Hoopa is right, Brother Jian Chen's contributions for today's profit cannot go unnoticed. From the 7 Class 2 magical beasts, Jian Chen had killed 3 of them by himself. Brother Jian Chen, come. Take a drink. Chang Ning Feng held out his wine gourd towards him. Jian Chen took the gourd from Chang Ning Feng and took a drink joyously. Don't say things like this. When we talk about contributions, everyone in this group had contributed. What can be said for sure, however, is that this time's trip in the Magical Beast mountain range has given the group a profit never seen before. That's correct. With an expert like Brother Jian Chen here, our Flame Mercenaries has gotten a harvest far richer than anything else. Kendall spoke merrily. Seeing this pile of monster cores here makes me feel as if I am one step closer to my dream. Captain, what is your dream? Xiao Dao asked curiously. My dream is for our Flame Mercenaries to be the #1 mercenary group on the Tian Yuan continent. Captain Kendall roared happily as he said, this is my biggest dream. Hearing this, everyone began to laugh with him. The #1 mercenary group on the Tian Yuan continent, Kendall, your dream will be impossible to accomplish. Hoopa slapped Kendall on his back in a joking way. That's right, what Hoopa said is right. Kendall, your dream is like something from a fantasy. Following what you say, then I desire to be the strongest expert in the Tian Yuan continent. Deer laughed. The #1 expert on the continent, you dream highly. Jian Chen sat by the fire and smiled as he watched everyone gossip among themselves. Every so often, he would laugh with everyone, and at this moment within his heart, he was completely content for the first time in a long time. Although everyone was joking around with each other, but with each word they spoke to one another revealed the deep bonds of friendships between them all and even infected Jian Chen with it. After the food was eaten and the wine exhausted, everyone began to sprinkle some powder around themselves and the campsite to prevent their qi from escaping and being detected by the surrounding magical beasts. Then, they extinguished the campfire and dug into their tents to rest for the night. Jian Chen carelessly reclined within his own tent as he thought about a few things from the day. Right now in his hand were 2 Class 4 monster cores, but those were the only monster cores he had left. Even if he wanted to cultivate, he had no desire to use the Class 4 monster cores. When he would become a Saint Master, then he would use the Class 4 monster cores to cultivate. It looks like tomorrow I should encourage Captain Kendall to go hunting for Class 3 magical beasts. If I can't get at least 3 Class 3 monster cores every day, then I won't be able to cultivate. Jian Chen thought to himself. With my strength, I should be able to kill any Class 3 magical beasts with ease, and with Captain Kendall and the group's cooperation, then that means at least 2 Class 3 magical beasts can be fought simultaneously. As long as we don't bump into 4 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, then there won't be any danger. And, the flame mercenaries should probably be able to stay in the magical beast mountain range for a month or so. Since the group is quite decent, I should try my best to help procure some monster cores for them during this time. A month after, I'll leave the group and put all my efforts in strengthening myself. I'll treat this month as a break. After all, the anti-venom genes within my body from the silver-striped golden snake haven't fully been incorporated into my bloodstream yet. While waiting for this, I need to focus on not sustaining any injuries, otherwise the blood with the anti-venom genes will flow away. If I can prevent that, then my bloodstream will have a constant source of anti-venom genes flowing through it, granting me the 1000 immunity. By that point, I'll never be able to be poisoned by anyone else as long as it doesn't reach the levels of a silver-striped golden snake in toxicity. Jian Chen lay back onto the ground of his tent as countless thoughts went through his head. Only after some time did he begin to calm himself and listen to his surroundings. After confirming it was safe, he began to sit cross-legged and absorb the world essence in the air to cultivate. Despite the fact that absorbing the world essence would only give him 1% of what he should normally getting, Jian Chen had no desire to sleep or give up any chance to increase his own strength. Chapter 116, Magical Horned Boar. The morning came as the sky grew brighter. Jian Chen, who was cultivating the world essence, finally opened his eyes. Feeling his internal saint force stay the same size instead of growing, Jian Chen could only sigh. Although his current cultivation rate for the world essence was far faster than before, whenever he cultivated, the world essence had practically been devoured by the 2 glows in his dantian. So his true cultivation rate could practically be ignored. Walking out of his tent, Jian Chen stood in the fresh morning atmosphere with his head raised up high to look at the tree branches overhead. In this morning hour, the air was filled with mist and it was quite dim out as the sun was still rising from the east. Hearing the faint snoring sounds coming from the other tents, Jian Chen shook his head in disappointment. With his strong sense of hearing, Jian Chen could detect that every single mercenary was fast asleep, and not a single one of them were cultivating. AI, how lazy. How do they think they could increase their strength? On the road of cultivation, while talent is very important, hard work is just as important as talent. Even if a man has the talent, if he does not work hard to cultivate, then his achievements will be no better than a man with no talent but is hardworking. Jian Chen thought to himself. After walking into the forest to get a tree branch, Jian Chen restarted the fire and fashioned out a simple grill to cook a few pieces of magical beast meat. Perhaps it was the outside movement that had awoken Kendall, but his head popped out from his tent to stare at Jian Chen, who was roasting meat. Jian Chen, why is it you're up so early? He laughed. Without even turning around in response, Jian Chen said, the sky is getting bright, so it's no longer that early. Captain Kendall looked up at the brightening sky and laughed. Without saying anything, he walked out from his tent and sat down next to Jian Chen by the fire. Just as Captain Kendall walked out of his tent, the other members of the group were awakened by the noise as well. Walking out of their tents, they proceeded to pack up and store everything into their space belts as they began to gather around the campfire. Even Hoopa approached the campfire with a gourd of wine as he continued to drink from it. Seeing everyone up and at the campfire, Jian Chen looked at Kendall and said, "Captain Kendall, what do you plan to do next for our course of action?" "The next thing we should do is to stay around this area for a while and continue to hunt down Class 1 and 2 magical beasts. Let's continue this for a few days at the Magical Beast Mountain Range so that we can build up a nice amount of profit before leaving," Kendall said plainly. Hearing this, Jian Chen went silent for a moment before opening his mouth to ask, "Captain Kendall, I have a suggestion, would you please listen to it?" Kendall's eyes lingered on Jian Chen as he laughed and said, "Jian Chen, whatever suggestion you have, say it. There's no need to think twice about what you're about to say. Although you've joined our flame mercenaries only recently, everyone here is still your brother, so whatever you say won't be taken as an insult. I suggest that we go a bit deeper, and directly kill Class 3 magical beasts." Jian Chen levelly looked at Kendall. "What? Kill Class 3 magical beasts? Jian Chen, you've gone crazy. A peak-level Class 2 magical beast was already so difficult to kill, let alone a Class 3 magical beast." Xiao Dao exclaimed in shock. Although the flame mercenaries now had the middle great saint, Jian Chen, in Xiao Dao's eyes, killing a Class 3 magical beast with this amount of power was still difficult. Hearing Jian Chen's proposal, everyone's eyebrows furrowed together. The flame mercenaries had one primary saint master and 6 great saints, but the magical beast had an innate superiority over the humans who were of the same strength level of them. If a person didn't have a battle skill or an attribute, then it would be practically impossible to kill a magical beast on the same level of strength as them. Even if they could, the price they would have to pay for doing so would be tremendous. On this magical beast mountain range where Class 3 magical beast roamed, if the flame mercenaries were to come across a primary Class 3 magical beast, then they would be able to kill it with some difficulty. However, if they were to come across a peak Class 3 magical beast, then they would have no chance at all. After killing a peak Class 2 magical beast, Captain Kendall and Chang Ning Feng had been injured. If it weren't for Jian Chen's intervention, then it wouldn't have been possible for them to capture and kill the magical beast. So for that reason, Jian Chen's suggestion to kill a Class 3 magical beast to the flame mercenaries was an attempt of suicide. Kobolds looked at Jian Chen with a curious glint in his eye. "Jian Chen, to think that you are suggesting to go kill a Class 3 magical beast, then I presume that you have the ability to kill a Class 3 magical beast?" Hearing kobolds, Jian Chen hesitated for a second before nodding his head. "As long as we don't come across 3 Class 3 magical beasts, I can safely say we won't be in mortal danger." Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. Doubt and disbelief clouded their eyes as they stared at Jian Chen. "Jian Chen, so what you're saying is that as long as we don't come across 3 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, then we won't be in any danger at all," Kendall said with a deep breath. If what Jian Chen said was true, then Kendall would want to bring Jian Chen with him to go kill some Class 3 magical beasts. After all, Class 3 magical beasts had a body and a monster core that were far more valuable than a Class 2 magical beast. "Jian Chen, do you really have enough strength to kill a Class 3 magical beast?" Deer asked to clarify. Although Jian Chen had killed a peak Class 2 magical beast, but the black tiger had already been injured, so its strength was far different than a Class 3 magical beast in perfect condition. "That's right, Jian Chen, something like this can't be randomly said and tried, otherwise you might throw away your life in the attempt," Chang Ning Feng said with worry. Jian Chen smiled at everyone. Despite everyone's reaction to this suggestion, Jian Chen wasn't unhappy with them. After all, killing a Class 3 magical beast was a task far too difficult for the flame mercenaries. Regardless of whether they were careful or not, they would still sustain a few injuries. Everyone should believe me this time. If we really cannot beat a Class 3 magical beast, then we at least have enough strength to run away," Jian Chen said with firm conviction. Hearing this, everyone's eyes gathered at the figure of Captain Kendall. Regarding such an important decision like this, it would be for the best for Captain Kendall to make the final decision. Kendall took in a deep breath of air as he stared at Jian Chen. Seeing how Jian Chen seemed to have complete faith in himself, Kendall bit his lips and finally made a decision. "Then how about this, we'll believe in what he says this time. Jian Chen, if you truly do believe yourself, then I'll let you lead the group for a while. Whatever we do will be up to you to guide us. Does anyone have any problems?" Kendall said to everyone else. "I've no problems. No problems here. I don't have any problems here either." Kendall's decision had quickly convinced everyone else without anyone having a disagreement. Jian Chen's face had a big smile on it as he said, "Then, since everyone has confidence in me, I will definitely make sure not to disappoint anyone. Let me plan a few things then." Jian Chen's voice stopped for a moment before saying, "Let me walk in the front while everyone else take the same positions. If we come across a Class 3 magical beast, then let me up first while everyone else surrounds it to prevent any other attacks. If any other magical beasts come, then you guys should attack those, but remember to take care of your own life. As long as you can stall the other magical beasts from attacking me, that'll be enough." When they heard Jian Chen's plan, everyone looked at each other with a dubious look. They had felt extremely curious about this plan, to have a middle great saint fight against a Class 3 magical beast by himself. This sort of plan was kind of unpleasant to hear since they all took a Class 3 magical beast seriously. After eating breakfast, everyone finished packing up their things and headed for the deeper parts of the magical beast mountain range. This time however, the formation of the group was slightly different with Jian Chen walking by himself 10 meters ahead of the group who retained their original positions. Not a single member of the group emitted any murderous intent while traveling, causing some Class 1 magical beasts to be attracted to them. However, since they wanted to continue on their journey quickly, they didn't let Xiao Dao or the other saints fight the magical beasts. Instead, the Class 1 magical beasts were given to the great saints to kill. As the group continued to walk into the forest, the terrain grew more and more nasty as swamps greeted their eyes in every direction. All sorts of toxic plants and insects also came into their field of view, and sometimes, a man-eating magical beast would come out of nowhere. On the road, everyone was very attentive to their surroundings. While listening to the sounds underneath their feet, they were also cautiously looking around themselves. At this point, a few Class 2 magical beasts had attacked them, but they continued onward. The amount of Class 1 magical beasts began to lessen while they encountered a Class 2 magical beast every so often. At that moment, the leading Jian Chen's ears twitched, and then he suddenly stopped in his tracks, raising a hand to signal the flame mercenaries behind him to stop as well. Seeing Jian Chen's movement, everyone in the mercenary group had stopped as well and nervously looked carefully at their surroundings. Although Jian Chen had repeated time after time that as long as 3 Class 3 magical beasts didn't attack them at the same time, then they would be in no danger at all, everyone was still extremely nervous. After all, they were up against a Class 3 magical beast this time instead of the normal Class 2 magical beasts. Although there was only one class apart from each other, the difference in strength between a Class 2 and a Class 3 magical beast was vast. At that moment, the cry of a wild beast rang out from ahead of them. The grass around them violently swayed as a great, 2-meter-tall magical beast appeared in the people's line of vision. This magical beast looked like a wild boar. It had a long nose, and the only thing different from a wild boar was the fact that it had fierce, inch-long, snow-white teeth protruding from the corners of its mouth. It also had a single horn sprouting from its forehead. Captain Kendall surveyed the magical beast in front of them. His expression turned grave as he said, "Magical horned boar. Jian Chen, be careful. That's a Class 3 magical horned boar." Jian Chen nodded his head as he stared impassively at the magical horned boar. The silver glow of his light wind sword gradually appeared in his right hand as it was enveloped by a hazy glow of light that covered the entire blade. "We'll act as we had originally planned. Let me deal with this magical beast, you guys just keep yourselves safe." As soon as he said this, Jian Chen raised his sword and swiftly charged at the magical horned boar. Chapter 117, Fighting Strength That Causes Others to Quake in Fear. The flame mercenaries' eyes grew wide as they all watched Jian Chen charge at the magical horned boar alone. Their gazes were all locked onto Jian Chen's figure that appeared neither tall nor sturdy. Everyone wanted to witness exactly how Jian Chen was going to kill the Class 3 magical horned boar. Captain Kendall had a serious expression on his face as he sent a powerful saint force rushing out from his right hand. A wide axe gradually materialized in his hands, which he grasped tightly as his fierce eyes staring unblinkingly at Jian Chen's frail-looking body. As soon as Jian Chen was unable to resist the Class 3 magical beast's attacks, he'd charged to the front lines without any hesitation to save Jian Chen. Among this group, he was most likely the only person that could contend against the magical horned boar, albeit with difficulty. Jian Chen was like a monster as he whipped up fine winds with his swift charge toward the magical horned boar in front of him. The light wind sword in his hand became a silver glow, as if turning into a slim and spectacular flash of lightning that pierced toward the magical horned boar's throat. Seeing the silver light, the corners of the magical horned boar's eyes flashed with a fierce glow, faintly expressing a dull look of concentration. It gave a low roar, and its heavy body quickly retreated. At the same time, it tried to turn its entire upper body to the side as it attempted to evade Jian Chen's sword coming at its throat. Although the magical horned boar had already tried its hardest to evade, its enormous body was really too cumbersome. In addition, speed was originally the magical horned boar's weakness. There was no way it could dodge Jian Chen's blade that was as fast as lightning. Pooh! The light wind sword pierced deeply into the magical horned boar's throat, instantly severing its life force. Immediately afterward, the magical horned boar's entire body suddenly grew rigid. Its pair of large eyes gradually lost their feeling, and before it could even give a miserable cry, its entire body fell to the ground with a bang. Jian Chen pulled out the bloody sword from the magical horned boar's throat. As he casually moved it, all of the blood on the light wind sword began to gradually flow downward. It slowly gathered at the point's end, before finally dripping onto the ground, drop by drop. Absorbing the light wind sword back into his body, Jian Chen revealed a satisfied smile on his face. After he had broke through to become a middle great saint, his fighting strength was far better than when he was a primary great saint. No matter if it was the speed of his light wind sword was or the strength of the sword chi around, both had become even stronger than before. Right now killing a Class 3 magical beast was nothing more than a simple task. Looking at the Class 3 magical horned boar lying on the ground, Jian Chen indifferently said, "Captain Kendall, I'll leave this Class 3 magical beast carcass for you to handle." Not a single sound could be heard from behind Jian Chen in response to his words. Sensing that there was something odd, Jian Chen turned around, only to see that all of the flame mercenaries were currently looking at the magical horned boar on the ground blankly with round eyes. All of them had astonished looks of disbelief. Seeing everyone's brilliant expression, Jian Chen shook his head with a bitter smile. To the flame mercenaries, a Class 3 magical beast was something far beyond their strength. They couldn't kill it in one blow, and if they were hit with one blow, then that would be the end for them. To the mercenaries whose strength was weaker than a Class 3 magical beast, this display of strength shocked them to their core. The people were in a shocked daze for quite a while. Captain Kendall was the first to regain his senses. He exhaled deeply to slowly suppress his shock, and he looked at Jian Chen with a complicated look as he said, "Jian Chen, your strength is too abnormal. Even a Class 3 magical beast was utterly unable to stand up against you, you were able to kill it as easy as pie. This is a Class 3 magical beast, you know." Soon afterward, everyone was gradually brought back to their senses as they looked at Jian Chen with a complicated look of shock and disbelief. Chang Ningfeng let loose a long breath of air and said, "AI, your strength is unbelievable." This was a Class 3 magical beast, but I'm having trouble thinking that this was nothing more than a Class 1 magical beast from how well you handled it. Hearing this, everyone simultaneously nodded their heads as Deer said, "Jian Chen, is your strength really at middle great saint? Seeing how easily you killed this Class 3 magical beast, I'm having a hard time believing you're not at the great saint master level yet." Deer looked at Jian Chen with a complex stare mixed in with a look of envy. After all, Jian Chen was much younger than him, so who wouldn't be envious of his strength? Kobolds hesitated for a bit before opening his mouth to say, "Jian Chen, could it be that what you used just now was a high-level battle skill? I was completely unable to tell when exactly your sword had pierced the magical horned boar's throat." "That's right, I didn't see it clearly. Actually, I couldn't even see a hint of a shadow," Hoopa added in an extremely depressed tone. Hearing this, Jian Chen smiled and said, "It can't really be said to be a battle skill. My swordplay is just on the faster side. It was so fast that we couldn't even see it clearly. That speed is a bit too terrifying," Deer said in a low voice. Kendall walked up to the body of the magical horned boar and said, "Okay, let's not talk about this for now. Everyone come help me take care of the body." Soon after, everyone walked up to the body of the magical horned boar as Xiao Dao took out his saint weapon, which was a small dagger. Fiercely cutting into the stomach of the magical horned boar, he attempted to extract the monster core. However, the moment he had stabbed into the boar's stomach, the blade was only capable of making a small finger-sized hole in it. Although the defense of the magical horned boar wasn't all that outstanding, it was still a Class 3 magical beast. Their leathery skin was still well known, so with Xiao Dao's saint-level strength, if he wanted to cut into the stomach of the magical horned boar, he would have to expend a great amount of effort in order to make a larger cut through the skin. Seeing how Xiao Dao could only cut a small finger-sized hole in the stomach of the magical horned boar, Deer shook his head and walked up beside Xiao Dao. "Xiao Dao, let me give it a try." A great amount of saint force was concentrated around his right arm as a two-handed sword appeared in his palm. "The leather skin of this Class 3 magical beast is quite tough, I've learned a lot today." Xiao Dao cursed as he obediently stood aside for Deer. Soon after, Deer used his two-handed sword to cut open the belly of the boar and then extracting the bloody Class 3 monster core from within. Wiping it clean of blood, he walked up to Jian Chen and Kendall with some hesitation before offering it up to Jian Chen. "Brother Jian Chen, this Class 3 magical horned boar was killed by you, so therefore, the monster core should go to you." Not waiting for Deer to finish his sentence, Jian Chen cut him off saying, "Uncle Deer, in accordance to the group rules, this monster core should be given to Captain Kendall to decide, and in the end everyone will give their agreement. This probably isn't the best thing to do." Deer looked hesitant. "There's nothing wrong with that, Uncle Deer, bring the monster core to Captain Kendall to decide," Jian Chen said firmly without any room for Deer to argue against. "Fine then." Deer had no choice but to hand the monster core over to Captain Kendall. Kendall gazed deeply at Jian Chen, but did not shirk away. Instead, he reached his hand out to accept the Class 3 monster core and said, "In that case, I'll take care of this monster core for now. Once we leave Magical Beast Mountain Range, I'll distribute all the profits based on contribution." Afterward, the group of people allocated one person's space belt to store the magical horned boar's carcass, and then they continued their journey. A Class 3 magical beast's body could be sold for quite a bit of money, so the flame mercenaries obviously wouldn't let this opportunity slip past them. Time quickly passed. Unknowingly, the group had already stayed in the Magical Beast Mountain Range for 10 days. These 10 days were definitely the happiest and most enjoyable moments for the flame mercenaries. That was because during this period, aside from the first day, the remaining days were filled with Jian Chen taking the lead to hunt Class 3 magical beasts in the mountain range. Because Jian Chen's actual combat strength had long surpassed a Saint Master's, he had absolutely no difficulty killing the Class 3 magical beasts. Moreover, ever since his strength had reached the mid-great saint level, Jian Chen hadn't once received an injury from fighting a Class 3 magical beast at close range. During this period of time, the flame mercenaries had long since stopped wondering about how strange the powerful strength Jian Chen displayed was. As Jian Chen revealed more and more of his strength, his position in the flame mercenary group continued to rise. Right now, almost everyone, including Captain Kendall, either held extreme respect for him, or was incomparably polite. This was because in 10 days, Jian Chen had brought about a great amount of profit for the flame mercenaries. In these past few days, Jian Chen had killed over 100 Class 3 magical beasts by himself and 300 Class 2 magical beasts, while the flame mercenaries did not kill as many by themselves. They had simply stood behind Jian Chen as he killed the magical beasts and extracted the monster cores from the magical beasts' corpses. Despite this, no one in the group had complained about the unfairness. Instead, they thought of this to be quite joyful. To them, this was as simple as picking up money. By nightfall, the full moon was suspended overhead in the night sky and illuminated the land below in its white glow. Within one of the larger areas of the magical beast mountain range, a large bonfire lit up the night as the embers from the fire flickered and danced into the sky. 10 people wearing the fur of magical beasts sat around the bonfire. These relaxed figures were the flame mercenaries. These past days we have harvested 125 Class 3 monster cores, 364 Class 2 monster cores, and not even 30 Class 1 monster cores. Other than that, we also have a few Class 3 magical beast corpses. Kendall proclaimed as he examined the items the group had taken. Hearing Kendall's exclamation, everyone let loose an extremely happy smile. Because of this type of harvest, everyone was extremely satisfied. However, everyone knew that if they didn't have the help of Jian Chen, they wouldn't even have a single Class 3 monster core. After all, killing one Class 3 magical beast was already too difficult for them, and killing even half the amount of Class 2 magical beasts would have been impossible to do by themselves. Chapter 118, Class 5 Cub. After 10 days of constant hunting, I'm sure everyone is tired. Plus, the rations we have in our space belts are definitely almost all gone, so tomorrow morning, let's go back to Wake City and rest there. Does anyone else object? Kendall asked. Everyone looked at Jian Chen as Deer asked, Jian Chen, why don't you make this decision? Jian Chen poked at the campfire with a tree branch and said absent-mindedly, Captain Kendall's decision is the best, I have no disagreements. Captain Kendall hesitated for a moment before looking back at everyone else. Since Brother Jian Chen has no disagreements, then tomorrow morning we shall leave the magical beast mountain range and rest up for a few days in Wake City. Brother Jian Chen had fought Class 3 magical beasts continuously, so I am sure even he is tired by now. For the first time, Captain Kendall's voice held some hesitation in it. Class 3 magical beasts were something the flame mercenaries had always wanted to provoke in order to test their own strength. These past few days of following Jian Chen's lead, they had picked up many Class 3 magical beast corpses and strengthened themselves. This type of situation had given the flame mercenaries an incomparably matchless amount of happiness. If their conditions allowed it, then everyone would have loved to stay around the magical beast mountain range for a few more days. However, they knew in their hearts that while Jian Chen had suffered virtually no injuries after fighting battle after battle against Class 3 magical beasts, he had to be exhausted. Jian Chen needed to rest and readjust his body. When we return, the very first thing we have to do is to handle the corpses of the magical beast. The longer they stay in the space belts, the faster they'll go stale, which will bring down the price. Xia Dao poked at his space belt as he spoke. Following Xiao Dao's action, the others subconsciously reached out to touch their space belts as well. Right now, each of them had 1 to 2, and some even had 3 to 4 smaller Class 3 magical beast carcasses stored within them. In addition, the items originally inside their space belts had all been transferred to Captain Kendall. After all, none of their family properties were worth much anyways. At that moment, a savory scent wafted into the air from the campfire. It was the smell of the pieces of the magical beast meat being cooked to a golden color as the tender fat began to drip down slowly due to caramelization. The fat continued to drip down to the floor, causing everyone to hear it. Smelling the dense aroma let loose everyone's appetites. Some people's stomachs even began to growl loudly. Suddenly, Jian Chen's ears twitched. He abruptly turned around to look behind him. The moment he looked back, he saw that a petite, animal-like body shot toward him from the distance, as fast as lightning. Jian Chen's vision blurred for a mere second, but that was enough time for the petite figure to approach him. "Everyone be careful!" Jian Chen cried out. Unable to have enough time to identify what type of magical beast this was. Both of his hands slapped onto the ground as he leapt up from his sitting posture on the floor. Flying in midair, Jian Chen's light wind sword instantaneously appeared within Jian Chen's right hand. The rest of the flame mercenaries weren't slow to react either. As soon as they heard Jian Chen's cry, all of the people had stood up from their spots and materialized their spirit weapons, cautiously surveying their surroundings. Jian Chen's body rolled through the air until he landed 3 meters away on the ground. His eyes stared at the campfire and then at the small beast right next to it. The little beast looked quite adorable. It had pure gold fur which shone under the fire's illumination, practically radiating a mist of light. Its eyes were locked onto the barbecue cooking over the fire, which was currently emitting an extremely savory aroma. It continuously licked its lips with its small tongue to wet them, as its front claws eagerly shifted on the ground where it stood. It looked like it was extremely impatient. Seeing that the small beast in front of him wasn't even 0.33 m long, Jian Chen immediately let loose a breath. Based on the small beast's appearance, it was evident that it had been enticed by the magical beast meat's delicious aroma. "Jian Chen, just what happened exactly?" Kendall's voice rang out. The moment he had heard Jian Chen's voice, he had immediately went on guard as he observed what was happening around him, but whatever was happening he didn't notice. Jian Chen bitterly smiled, "Nothing really. It was just that thing suddenly ran out." Jian Chen extended his finger to point at the little beast currently standing in front of the fire. Hearing this, everyone looked at the direction Jian Chen pointed at. It was only at that moment that they realized there was a small beast there. "That's..." A few people exchanged surprised glances. Kendall walked forward a few steps as he investigated the area and then at the small beast there before revealing a thinking expression. "It looks like this is the cub of a magical beast. Jian Chen, do you think you can figure out where this cub came from or what type of magical beast it is?" Jian Chen unhurriedly approached the little beast, and slowly crouched down to survey the little beast. The beast wasn't the least bit afraid of the strangers surrounding it, it didn't even bother to glance at them. Its eyes were instead completely locked onto the cooking meat. It might have been because it wasn't scared of people, or it might have been because it was still young, but it did not seem afraid at all. Seeing the little beast in such a state, Jian Chen couldn't help but smile. He reached a hand out to grab one of the meat skewers, and ripped off a piece of the golden, cooked meat. He then waved it in front of the beast's nose, letting it smell it a bit more. "Ayo! Ayo! Ayo!" The little beast's eyes were now tightly locked onto the piece of meat that Jian Chen had ripped off, and it began to stamp its forehooves impatiently. Finally, its entire body stood up, and it continued to cry out, "Ayo! Ayo!" as saliva fell from the corners of its mouth. Seeing how much the little beast wanted to eat the piece of meat, Jian Chen stopped enticing it, and directly placed the meat into its mouth. The little beast immediately extended its 2 front claws to tightly hug the piece of meat. Then it directly placed it into its mouth to wolf it down, completely unafraid of how hot it was. Jian Chen extended his hand to turn the cub. At this moment he was sizing it up, and the cub hadn't yet realized that it was being looked at by a few other people. It continued to stuff the pieces of magical beast meat in its mouth. Looking at the cub, Jian Chen's face gradually grew brighter as an excited smile appeared on it. Jianchen, have you figured out what type of magical beast this is or where it's from? Chang Ningfeng asked as he watched the reactions on Jianchen's face. Jianchen slowly put down the cub as he said excitedly, if I'm not wrong about my information, then this should be the cub of the Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King. What, the cub of a Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King? Jianchen, are you sure you aren't mistaken? Kobolds covered his mouth in surprise, his tone unable to hide his astonishment. Everyone else had similar expressions of shock and disbelief as well. The cub of the Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King, although it wasn't too strong, this type of magical beast still had a plethora of superior innate advantages. When it becomes an adult, it would have the strength of a Earth Saint Master without any obstructions. It could even be said that it was smooth sailing for it while having a large amount of room to improve, unlike regular magical beasts. After its adulthood, there was still an endless road of cultivation to be had so it could slowly improve its strength, but whether or not it could cultivate long enough to become a Class 5 magical beast, that could not be said for sure. Jianchen sized up the little beast that was currently eating with relish, and said, I shouldn't be wrong. Jianchen had already read quite a few books about magical beasts back at Kargath Academy's library. Thus, Jianchen knew majority of the magical beast types in Tianyun continent. The most eye-catching thing on a golden fur tiger king was its pure golden fur, as well as the symbol for king being imprinted onto it. It was for this reason that Jianchen could say for sure what type of beast this was. Currently, all of their hearts were uncontrollably racing. Although a Class 5 magical beast cub's strength was far from an actual Class 5, as well as the fact that it would still take quite a while for it to reach adulthood, its value was far more than an adult Class 5 magical beast. This was because an adult Class 5 magical beast already possessed basic intelligence, and would rather die than become a human's pet or mount. That's why taming an adult magical beast was incomparably difficult. However, a young magical beast was different, because it had yet to mature, taming it was extremely easy. Moreover, it was much easier to foster a relationship with one. If one started taming a Class 5 magical beast while it was still a cub, it would not only have the strength of any other Class 5 magical beast when it reached adulthood, it would also continue to grow, and could reach Class 6. There was even a possibility that it could become a Class 7 magical beast. The most important thing was that during this time, the bonds between the cub and its tamer would be very deep. This way, there would be no need to expend as much effort to get a strong magical beast that would be extremely loyal to its master and would never betray him. So for that reason, the cub of a Class 5 magical beast would be priceless in the market. If the cub of a Class 5 magical beast were to appear, then there would be many strong parties that would try to fight over it. I hadn't thought that we'd actually discover a Class 5 magical beast cub. Moreover, it was a cub that approached us by itself. Our luck is really amazing. Xiao Dao said in excitement. If we sell this Class 5 magical beast cub, I wonder how much money we can get. Hoopa said in a tone that was just as excited. He looked at the golden fur tiger king cub as if it were a mountain of glittering gold. Kobold's face grew even more excited for a moment before turning serious. It doesn't matter whether or not if we can sell it for a higher price, if we can capture it for sure, then in our future, we won't ever need to come back to the magical beast mountain range and hunt for money. Right now, the only problem is that the parents of this cub are somewhere. If we were to come across them somehow, then we would definitely not make it out alive. After all, a Class 5 magical beast is far beyond our capabilities. Kobold's gaze became more concentrated as he surveyed his surroundings before saying, the most important question is, how are we going to transport the cub? Chapter 119, Fighting over the cub. Hearing Kobold's words, the smile on everyone's faces slowly dissipated. What he had said wasn't false. If they were to try and take the cub of the Golden Fur Tiger King, they would encounter a multitude of trouble. Even if they didn't come across the parents of this cub, bringing it back to Wake City would still be a tremendously difficult task. After all, a cub was a living animal. It could not go into the space within a space belt without dying, since the inside of the belt was uninhabitable. Thus, they would have to transport it from the outside. But since the road would have many groups of people, the news of a golden fur tiger king cub would quickly spread about. By that point, many strong factions would come and try to provoke the flame mercenaries. With their current strength, this would be something they wouldn't be able to fend off. Ha 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 ha, if you don't have the power to carry the cub of the golden fur tiger king out, then why don't you just hand it over to us? At that moment, a loud shout with unconcealed joy was heard. The dark figure of a person came into view, as well as a whole group of people accompanying him. They quickly surrounded the flame mercenaries. There were 20 people in total, with each of them wearing a steel helmet and metal armor. Many of the mercenaries were wearing broken armor, while some of them had blood dripping from them. Just one look at them was enough for people to tell that they had just been in a fight. Seeing such a large crowd of people come out of nowhere, everyone in the flame mercenaries suddenly grew unsightly expressions. But the moment they saw the little emblems on their chests, their faces immediately lost all color. Even Kendall was deathly pale as he spoke, so it's the Zhou mercenaries. His voice trembled with each syllable. Ha ha ha, you have quite the eyesight to recognize us. Hand over the tiger cub to us nice and easy, you already know the consequences if you don't. The leader spoke with a cold gaze directed at each person in front of him in disdain. However, as he looked at the still-eating tiger cub, an unconcealed happiness could be seen in his eyes. No one in the flame mercenaries said a thing as their faces continued to lose color rapidly. Jian Chen swept his eyes over each individual Zhou mercenary. With his power, he could already determine how strong each mercenary roughly was. In his eyes, aside from the 2 Saint Masters, everyone else was a great saint. Those 2 Saint Masters, however, were still higher than Captain Kendall, and was probably at least middle Saint Master level. Jian Chen slowly let loose a small breath of air as he looked around himself. With his strength, as long as there wasn't a great Saint Master, there wouldn't be a problem. Ayo. Oh. By this point, the cub had already finished eating all of the magical beast meat given to it, and was now hungrily staring at the still grilling pieces over the bonfire. It began to cry out non-stop for the meat in hunger, completely unaware of the danger that was looming around it. Jian Chen slowly crouched down and took the cub into his chest. At the same time, each and every member of the Zhou mercenaries glared at Jian Chen with a cold look, emitting murderous intent. Kid, hand over the cub to me now. Otherwise, you'll be dying here and now. The leader of the Zhou mercenaries shouted at Jian Chen. Hearing this, Jian Chen returned their stares back at them without a hint of anger in them. Instead, he began to smile and said, even if we hand over the cub to you, you won't let us go because you're afraid that we'll spread news of the cub, and bring about unavoidable trouble onto you. Moreover, the trouble stirred would be quite major. The leader sneered as he stared at Jian Chen. You're quite intelligent, but there are times that the smarter a person is, the sooner they die. And so sometimes, a man doesn't want to be intelligent. Being stupid would allow them to live a little longer. As he spoke, a great amount of saint force was being concentrated within his right arm, quickly forming a long sword. The leader pointed the tip of the sword at Jian Chen and said coldly, Kid, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over the cub obediently, otherwise, I swear I'll make you die a wretched death. The man growled as the other Zhou mercenaries began to take out their own saint weapons and surrounded Jian Chen to suppress him with their intimidation. At the same time, the flame mercenaries had decided not to be outdone, and started to materialize their own saint weapons. They were extremely grave as they internally understood that even if they handed over the cub to the Zhou mercenaries, they would still be killed. If it was the other way around, they would have done the same thing, and not let the Zhou mercenaries go. So if they were to die, they wanted to take down a Zhou mercenary along with them. Even if they couldn't, the Zhou mercenaries definitely wouldn't escape from this without a few casualties. Seeing the reactions of everyone in the flame mercenaries, the leader of the Zhou mercenaries sneered with disdain before looking back to Jian Chen and saying, Kid, no more kidding around. If you hand over the cub to me, I'll spare your lives. Right now, the cub was in Jian Chen's arms. Seeing how Jian Chen had no intentions of letting it go, the man was afraid that if he were to act rashly, Jian Chen would kill the cub. Jian Chen evidently knew why the man was hesitating and couldn't help but laugh. His left hand held the howling cub while his right hand patted the shaggy fur on top of its head. You wanted this cub so badly, so why aren't you coming to get it? Could it be you have the guts to say you want it, but not the guts to take it? The cold stare intensified onto Jian Chen as the man's face froze impassively. In his heart he had felt a strange premonition. Jian Chen's reaction was completely abnormal, letting him feel a bit uneasy. You! Bring me that cub. The leader called out to a nearby mercenary. Yes. The mercenary didn't hesitate at all as he walked toward Jian Chen carefully as if to test and see what Jian Chen would do. When the mercenary cautiously walked up to Jian Chen unexpectedly didn't show any signs of movement. Instead, he simply stood there with an unchanging smile. Despite this, the mercenary still didn't dare to let his guard down. He slowly reached his hand out to carefully grab at the cub in Jian Chen's hands. At the same time, every mercenary in the Zhou mercenaries clenched their saint weapons tightly. Even the leader was growing tenser by the second as he looked at Jian Chen. In a flash, the mercenary had succeeded in taking the club despite the struggle it had put up. From beginning to end, the mercenary had been extremely wary of any sudden attacks by Jian Chen. At that moment, Jian Chen's eyes grew cold as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Transforming into a silver ray of light, it flashed towards the mercenary's throat like silver lightning. Although the mercenary was attentively guarding against Jian Chen, the sword strike was far too fast for him to dodge. The moment the flash of silver lightning had passed, the man had only felt a small pain in his throat. And right under his eyes, the image of a silver sword had abruptly appeared. In the next second, the mercenary choked and wordlessly screamed in agony as he fell to the ground. As for the Class 5 cub, it had flown through the air, fallen down onto the ground while howling loudly. Jian Chen's sword was so fast that even if the mercenary had forewarning about blocking against this sword, he would have failed. Jian Chen's sword was far too fast for the other man to dodge what was almost second nature for Jian Chen to aim for. The leader of the Zhou mercenaries looked a bit at loss as he watched Jian Chen pierce the throat of the mercenary with an incredulous look on his face. He was secretly astonished at how fast the sword was traveling. Even with his peak Saint Master strength, he had only seen the faint image of the sword, and was utterly incapable of seeing it clearly. In a short moment, the leader regained his thoughts as he squashed the astonishment within his heart. Everyone, forward. Slaughter without mercy, but do not harm the cub. He commanded as he raised his sword with his armored hand. With an ear-piercing whistle, his weapon slashed downward at Jian Chen's head. Within the Zhou mercenaries, the only other Saint Master expert had pulled out his sword and mimicked the leader's action by trying to cut down Jian Chen. From his initial strike, the two Saint Masters had already realized that Jian Chen wouldn't be an easy opponent to fight against, so the two Zhou mercenaries of the Saint Master level silently agreed to kill Jian Chen first. On the other side, the Flame mercenaries began to fight with the other members of the Zhou mercenaries, embroiling the place into the flames of war. Although the Flame mercenaries didn't scatter apart, they gathered around in a circle and had the three saints like Xiao Dao protected within. In this type of battle, the saints like Xiao Dao would have no chance to battle, and would only die a vain death if they tried. The five great saints and the primary Saint Master Kendall formed the outside circle, and were prepared to fight any of the Zhou mercenaries to the death. However, because of the difference in strength between the two sides, the fight didn't last long. The Flame mercenaries were already at a clear disadvantage and were already being pressured by the Zhou mercenaries, to the point of being able to only defend. With his sword in hand, Jian Chen's imposing manner drastically changed. His demeanor was like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed, giving the people around him the sensation of being shown off to. In an instant, the sword suddenly grew colder, and somehow seemed to become sharper. To the enemies of the same rank, it was almost as if the sword was robbing them of their courage. Chapter 120, The shocking arrival of the Tiger King. Jian Chen simply had no desire to make contact with the sword of the leader of the Zhou mercenaries. Narrowly dodging the giant sword of the leader, Jian Chen's sword disappeared into a blur of silver light once more as Jian Chen stabbed at the leader. Although Jian Chen's fighting ability was no weaker than a Saint Master, that was only because of his fighting strength. The Saint force within his body was still weaker than the one within a Saint Master by quite the amount. So if Jian Chen's light wind sword were to make contact with the leader of the Zhou mercenaries, then Jian Chen would be the one at a disadvantage here, making collisions between the two an unwise choice. Jian Chen's strongest advantage was his fast swordplay, which would allow him to beat anyone within his strength level before they could even react to it. Even for those who were a grade higher than him in strength, they would only be able to see the faint and blurry images of the sword. With his profound steps, Jian Chen would even be able to fight against anyone higher than himself provided they weren't a wind-attributed saint. Against a saint force that was stronger than his own, unless it was absolutely necessary, Jian Chen did not want to take any risks and end up facing against his weak point. Seeing Jian Chen use such an inconceivable speed to attack his throat, the leader's face became extremely serious as his saint force began to frantically circulate within his body. With his body in a peak state of fitness, the man's body turned around and then leapt to the side in order to narrowly dodge Jian Chen's otherwise fatal sword. Although Jian Chen had been fast in his movements, the peak Saint Master strength leader had only been forced to dodge to the side. Although, at the same time, looking at the shoulder plate of the man, Jian Chen could see the white scar traces from where the light wind sword had grazed by. With a turn of his wrist, the light wind sword had suddenly moved in a way that made it look like a tiny snake under the skillful hand of Jian Chen. As the sword swished through the air, it pursued the nearby figure of the man who had only just recently dodged the sword. The leader's face had never been so serious. Although he could feel that Jian Chen's strength was nowhere near his own, the speed of Jian Chen's sword was far beyond what he could do. He could only dodge the sword narrowly, and with the sword relentlessly pursuing his throat, if he were to make a small mistake, then the possibility that he would lose his life was very high. Without hesitation, the leader brought his giant sword up to block the sword aimed at his throat. The moment he had brought the sword up to his neck, the light wind sword had already brushed against it. Although the light wind sword had failed to pierce into the leader's body, the sword chi that was coiling around the blade had made the leader extremely terrified. Secretly thinking to himself, what a sharp sword chi. What type of method did this kid use to cultivate? Could it be that he used a battle skill? Just thinking about the term battle skill had inadvertently fired up the man's spirits and he couldn't help but think to spare Jian Chen. He thought that he could wrest away the battle skill from Jian Chen. Since battle skills were indeed very precious within the Tian Yuan continent and that it helped one's cultivation improve by leaps and bounds. Even though he was one of the highest-ranked member of the Zhou mercenaries in Wake City, he didn't have a battle skill and neither did the great Saint Masters in the group. As his mind wandered about this topic, a fierce crisis was about to overturn him. Seeing that the silver-white light was rapidly getting bigger within his eyesight, he realized that this next sword stroke was 2 or 3 times faster than the last 2 strikes. In an instant, the silver sword had evaded his own great sword and arrived at his throat. A small ray of light could be seen as the sharp point of the sword flashed from within the glare. The leader was terrified beyond belief. In the moment he had reacted, there was only a foot separating him and the sword chi enveloped blade, but the sword had traveled this distance within a flash. Even though the leader had the strength of a peak Saint Master, there would be no time for him to dodge it. Just as the light wind sword was about to pierce into the leader's throat, an ear-piercing sound was heard as another sword came in from the side. Abruptly knocking against the light wind sword, it altered the trajectory of it so that it would go past the leader's neck without harm. The sudden appearance of this sword was caused by the second Saint Master of the Zhou mercenaries. Even after knocking the light wind sword out of the way, that man didn't stop there. He immediately attacked Jian Chen fiercely while the leader cried out, "Casa, for you to not pay attention at a time like this, did you want to die, you bastard?" Although that man was yelling at him, the leader wasn't angry at all. Instead he felt his neck with his own hand as his face grew pale and his forehead started to drip with sweat. This was because when he felt his neck where his leather armor was, there was a gap revealing where the sword had gone through. If it were not for the intervention of another person, then having a simple cut on his leather armor would have been the least of his worries. At this moment, Jian Chen had already struck back at the second Saint Master. This man only had middle Saint Master strength and was weaker than the leader of the Zhou mercenaries by a small margin. In the few rounds Jian Chen had exchanged with the other Saint Master, he was slowly pushing back the other Saint Master. "Casa, why are you just standing there foolishly? Come quickly and help me, this kid's sword is far too fast for me to continue blocking any longer. God damn it, how is his speed this fast?" Looking at the still dazed leader, the mercenary that was fighting Jian Chen cursed out loud at him. Fighting Jian Chen was like fighting against the storming rain and winds itself, and with each series of sword strokes Jian Chen had swung, the more difficult it was getting to defend against. Even his leather armor was starting to have traces of Jian Chen's sword running across it despite the extraordinary resilience of the leather. He was afraid that very soon, his body wouldn't have an area without a wound running across it. Hearing his friend curse at him, the leader's eyes narrowed as the saint force within his saint weapon pulsated tremendously. Raising his arm, he immediately dashed forward to slash down on Jian Chen. As the sword dropped down, a small amount of sword chi flickered as it flew toward Jian Chen. Sparing a sideways glance at Casa, Jian Chen swayed slightly to the side and dodged the sword chi-filled blade. The sword continued onwards to smash into a large tree with a resounding boom, allowing everyone to hear and see a large gash being revealed on the trunk. Afterwards, another ear-piercing shriek was heard as the two Saint Masters were already ready to strike once more, their saint weapons filling the air with their saint force. Jian Chen's eyes grew cold as he stared unflinchingly at the two incoming blades. The light wind sword began to release an even denser amount of sword chi that seemed to cover the entire sky as the sword made contact with the other two swords. Ding ding ding, the metallic sounds of swords rang out in the forest as in that moment, Jian Chen had swung out 18 times with his sword, each one accurately hitting the other blades. Each one of the 18 strikes hit the great swords right on the blade fiercely, causing the blade to shake with a strong vibration with every hit. When the amount of strikes had hit 18, the amount of energy transmitted into the other swords was far too much for the Zhou mercenaries to handle. Immediately, both of the mercenaries' right arms went numb, especially the place between their thumb and forefinger. Feeling the extreme amount of numbness in their arms, the two mercenaries looked at each other in shock. At this moment, the two of them had secretly wanted to flee, although they knew that Jian Chen's strength wasn't on par with them. Jian Chen was showing off a fighting strength that was frightening the both of them. His strength was hard to defend against, and against his lightning-fast speed, they both had to push their concentration to the extreme or risk seeing each other at the Yellow River. If they were not careful, then their deaths here would be for certain. "Captain Casa, the cub is already in our possession." The two Saint Masters turned around to hear who had just spoken, only to see an armored mercenary with the struggling cub in his hands. Its claws waved about in midair as it howled unceasingly. While it was a cute sight, it was also quite a pathetic one. Seeing this, the two mercenaries had a joyous smile on their faces, but then at the same time, Jian Chen's light wind sword flashed toward the leader's throat once more. This time, Casa was neither on guard nor able to dodge in time, and the other Saint Master was in no position to save him like last time. The sword chi-enhanced sword slashed through Casa's leather armor and pierced straight into his throat. "Casa!" The other mercenary reached out in shock, but at the moment he saw his leader's throat pierced through, his eyes bulged out of his eye sockets as he roared. A large amount of saint force began to condense within his saint weapon as he slashed at Jian Chen with it. Jian Chen didn't even bother to spare him a glance as he stamped off the ground. The force propelled him forward like an artillery shell as he rocketed toward the mercenary with the struggling cub. Seeing the peak Saint Master Captain Casa be killed, the mercenary's eyes bulged as he couldn't believe that such a strong expert would be killed so easily. However, the mercenary wasn't that stupid and immediately threw the cub at the remaining Saint Master that was fighting against Jian Chen. Captain Cross, catch! The cub flew into the air in a wild arc before landing perfectly within the arms of the last remaining Saint Master. Seeing the Class 5 cub within his hand, Captain Cross' previously murderous face suddenly calmed down as he hesitated before saying, "Everyone move out from here." Who? As Cross spoke, the deep growl of a tiger suddenly came loudly from the depths of the forest. Coming through the pitch darkness, the 20-something people there all froze as they realized what they had just heard. Chapter 121. A frantic escape. As the roar was heard, the previously quiet magical beast mountain range became noisy once more. Practically every single magical beast was awoken and their sounds began to cry out in every direction. Every magical beast had made a sound, but not a single one of them would dare go against the tiger. Hearing the roar of the tiger, Jian Chen's face changed into a severely serious one. "Oh no, this is the roar of the Golden Fur Tiger King." His voice was unnaturally serious since the Golden Fur Tiger King was a Class 5 magical beast. This magical beast was special in the way that if it had reached a threshold, it could transform its body and from that moment on, it would enter a new world. The Class 5 magical beast was far different than a Class 4 magical beast, and with Jian Chen's current strength, taking care of a Class 4 magical beast would be hard already, let alone a Class 5 one. Not good, it's the roar of the Golden Fur Tiger King. Run, run quickly, everyone scatter or else we'll all die here. Captain Cross shouted as his voice trembled with fear. Even before he could finish his warning, he had immediately taken off into the forest with the cub of the Golden Fur Tiger King. Even the mercenaries who had been fighting the Flame Mercenaries immediately gave up the fight and immediately followed Cross into the forest. Suddenly, before Captain Cross could get too far into the forest, Jian Chen sped forward like a speed demon as his light wind sword flashed silver and aimed straight at the man's throat. Even at a dangerous time like this, Jian Chen had no plans of letting him go. Cross' face changed rapidly as he waved his own sword around. As his sword collided against Jian Chen's, Cross snarled, "Have you gone crazy? The Class 5 magical beast Golden Fur Tiger King is coming. If you continue to try to stop me, then you'll lose your chance to escape." Jian Chen was indifferent to Cross' words, almost as if he hadn't heard Cross speak at all. The light wind sword transformed into a ray of silver light as it traveled toward Cross once more. Cross raised his sword to defend himself against the lightning-like strikes. With no time to dodge, he was stabbed through the shoulder by Jian Chen, who at the same time grabbed at the cub with his left hand. Cross couldn't help but curse in pain as he continued to retreat with the cub in his hands still. "Everyone come together to block this kid. This cub is far too important for our Zhou mercenaries to lose." Hearing this, each Zhou mercenary began to hesitate, but no one dared to disobey Cross' orders. 5 men charged at Jian Chen with their saint weapons in hand in an effort to stall him. Cross had then fled into the surrounding forests while the unwilling mercenaries had stayed behind at first before quickly following Cross into the forest. Because great saints weren't a threat to Jian Chen at all, he had quickly dropped down 5 of them. The group of mercenaries that had followed Cross were quickly dropping like flies. Ho! The previously faraway roar of the tiger was getting closer as the Golden Fur Tiger King was approaching at rapid speeds. Jian Chen's face grew even more anxious as he looked at Kendall and said, "The Golden Fur Tiger King is approaching this area quickly, it won't take too long before it gets here. Captain Kendall, it's not good to stay here, let's leave quickly." Kendall looked at the blood-soaked members of the Flame Mercenaries and the multiple wounds on them. It was a good thing the battle didn't go on for long, otherwise they would had suffered from casualties. "Everyone hurry up and run away." Unable to dress up their bloody wounds, everyone quickly began to dash into the forest with great speed, but because of the various wounds they had, their movements weren't all that fast. Ho! Another roar of the tiger rang out, and this time it was extremely close by. In an instant, everyone could hear the tiger running towards them. The wind pressure it was generating was enough to flatten the tree leaves to the ground. Every single member of the flame mercenaries went pale in the face. As Kendall fled for his life, he looked behind him at Jian Chen and threw his space belt at him. Jian Chen, you have the strongest strength amongst all of us, so your chance of escaping is the highest among us. I entrust my space belt to you, you have to make sure you take this out. Seeing Captain Kendall throw his space belt at him, Jian Chen wanted to refuse it, but then Kendall opened his mouth once more. Jian Chen, don't refuse it. If by chance we don't make it out of these forests, then I beg of you to take care of our families. If I die here, then their lives would take a turn for the worse. My parents, my wife, and my child, they won't be able to live a good life in the future, so it all depends on you. Kendall pleaded with Jian Chen. Sending a complicated look at Kendall, Jian Chen nodded his head resolutely. Taking in the space belt, Jian Chen stared for a little longer and said, Uncle Kendall, we'll definitely make it out of here, that golden fur tiger king isn't looking for us. Ah, save me. A call for help suddenly came from behind. Kobolds, that was Kobolds. He fell in the swamps. Quickly now, grab onto my hand Kobolds, a voice called out. It was Xiao Dao who was extremely anxious. Hearing this, everyone stood still as Jian Chen looked behind him at Xiao Dao, only to see him on his belly with his hand outstretched into the swamps. In the swamp, Kobold's figure was already completely submerged. Jian Chen's face changed as he immediately followed what Xiao Dao was doing and plunged his hand into the swamp. However, like Xiao Dao, his hand had felt nothing. Kobolds, Xiao Dao closed his eyes in pain and sorrow. AI. Jian Chen sighed before hitting Xiao Dao on the shoulder, go. And then began to run once more. The other members began to sigh in sorrow as they closed their eyes. After a brief moment of silence, they continued to run deeper into the forest. With every second lost was another second of running that was thrown away. Because it was almost nightfall, the magical Beast Mountain range was very dark, so the visibility was low. On the path, everyone had tripped more than once, but they each picked themselves up from the ground as quickly as they fell and continued to run. Some decided to run on top of the tree branches in order to avoid the swamps below. After a while, Jian Chen's foot suddenly stopped, halting his forward momentum. Jian Chen, what are you doing slowing down? Hurry up and run. Kendall said anxiously. Jian Chen didn't speak and pointed ahead of them. Kendall looked to where Jian Chen's finger was pointing at, only to see the blurry figures of 10 mercenaries up ahead panting with exhaustion. It's the Zhou mercenaries. Jian Chen said. Kendall's eyes flashed with a cold glare as he growled, so it is, they're not running, so what are they doing standing there? They can't run, the road ahead of them is blocked off by a class 4 magical beast. Why is there a class 4 magical beast here? Come, let's take a detour around. Jian Chen jumped to a branch nearby. Ho! Another tiger roar came from behind, this time closer than ever. The roar was so loud, it shook the eardrums of the flame mercenaries, causing them to go deaf for a moment. After the roar, the gigantic figure came bursting in from behind and headed toward the Zhou mercenaries. Soon after the roar, the members of the Zhou mercenaries all fell to the ground, with a single member lifted into the air by the giant jaw of the tiger. Not good, the golden fur tiger king is far too fast, in such a short time it overtook us in speed. Let's go quickly, otherwise there'll be no chance. Seeing the shadowy figure, Jian Chen cried out in shock at the appearance of it before immediately jumping without hesitation into the foliage nearby. Ahead, the Zhou mercenaries, who were all alive and well 1 breath ago, had fallen to the claws of the golden fur tiger king. All that was left was the mercenary who was holding the cub cross. The golden fur tiger king was the real deal. Those who were only at the great saint level or under would not be able to withstand even a single hit from it. Cross left hand held the cub as his right hand held a sword that was ready to pierce the cub's neck, causing a stalemate between the golden fur tiger king and him. The golden fur tiger king was 4 meters long, but because of the guise of the night, the entire body of the tiger couldn't be seen clearly. Ho! The golden fur tiger king growled as its eyes became crimson. Staring at Cross with a furious glare, it didn't dare to act rashly with the cub in Cross' hands. As a Class 5 magical beast, it had enough knowledge to understand the situation. Get back, hurry up and retreat, otherwise we'll all die here. Cross cried out in terror as he stared at the golden fur tiger king. His entire body was shaking and his forehead was dripping with sweat. Ayo! Ayo! The cub began to struggle within the hands of Cross. Even it had begun to feel a little afraid. Even though it was a Class 5 magical beast in potential, it was still young, and did not have much power at the moment. The golden fur tiger king didn't give way, but then Cross bit his lip and pressed down with his sword, causing a few strands of golden fur to be cut away from the cub. Ho! The golden fur tiger king hastily growled before slowly retreating backward a few steps. However, the crimson glare in its eyes had intensified. Behind Cross was yet another Class 4 tiger that stared him down like one would look at their prey. Chapter 122, The Death of Kendall. Seeing the golden fur tiger king retreat, Cross let loose a sigh of relief. At this moment, his heart was pounding, and if anyone were to stand behind him, they would be able to clearly hear it. In this moment of desperation, Cross was nearly at the end of the road of life. However, he was rejoicing now because he had succeeded. Yet at the same time, it was far too early to rejoice, since while the golden fur tiger king was temporarily held back due to the cub, the Class 4 tiger behind was not. There was no way for Cross to make the Class 4 tiger retreat, but he had to make sure he didn't do anything hasty, otherwise it would lead to an unwanted ending. Right now the golden fur tiger king's eyes were crimson with fury, and the experienced Cross knew that the tiger was in a stage of extreme rage. It was only because of the fact that he had the cub that it was not acting out on impulse. That cub was Cross' protective charm, and if he were to lose control of it, Cross knew that what would come next would be the end of his life. Under the threat of death, Cross was strangely calm as he thought about what to do next. Despite being in a situation where death was all but guaranteed, he still did not give up his desire to live. As long as there was an opportunity, he wouldn't let it go. Although, with everything said, it was an extremely weak strand of an opportunity to live, and there he wasn't certain if he would be able to escape. Then, Cross' eyes landed on the nearby flame mercenaries. His heart thumped for a second before he immediately tossed the cub over to where they stood. Ho! Just as Cross made a move, the glaring golden fur tiger king exploded into action. Immediately bursting over to where Cross stood, it swung both of its paws onto Cross' shoulders, inflicting deep wounds on his shoulders. The tiger released a sky-shattering roar, making Cross unable to breathe. Because of the golden fur tiger king's action, Cross immediately paled as he started to mentally blank out. He had thrown the cub over to the flame mercenaries because he had thought that the golden fur tiger king would change targets, but he hadn't thought that the tiger would move that fast. The moment he had thrown the cub, the tiger had appeared right in front of him. At that moment, Cross knew that his life was over. Ayo! Ayo! The cub began to cry out in fear after being thrown by Cross. The sense of weightlessness had terrified the cub, causing it to cry out even more than before. Seeing the cub rise into the air and then arc downward, the crimson eyes of the tiger grew alarmed as it began to panic. With a single roar, it leapt away from its position over Cross's body and chased after the midair cub. Feeling the heaviness in his shoulders being lifted, Cross was momentarily stunned. Seeing how the golden fur tiger king had chased after the cub, he immediately awoke to his senses and had an ecstatic smile on his face. Despite the deep burning sensation he was feeling from his shoulders, his arms and legs fiercely pushed against the ground and he stood up. Limping into the forest, he then disappeared from sight. Seeing Cross flee into the bushes, the Class 4 tiger that had been blocking the route uneasily stamped both of its paws on the ground, and desperately wanted to chase after him. However, after seeing the explosion of anger from the golden fur tiger king, it suppressed its impulse. Although they initially possessed some intelligence, Class 4 magical beasts were still too stupid. Their abilities to think through problems couldn't possibly compare to a mature human adult's. The Golden Fur Tiger King had only told it to block the group of people in its path, but it didn't tell the tiger to chase after anyone that tried to flee. Before any further commands came from the Golden Fur Tiger King, this muscle-brained Class 4 tiger could only stare helplessly as Cross escaped. Even if it wanted to chase after it, it didn't dare to. Just as Captain Kendall was about to disappear into the foliage, a black blur flew over and struck him in the chest before falling to the ground. In response, Captain Kendall instinctively reached out his hand to pick up what had hit him. The moment his hand brushed against the black object, he understood just what exactly it was, and grew pale in the face. Crap, this is the cub of the Golden Fur Tiger King. By this point in time, the cub of the Golden Fur Tiger King was no longer a valuable asset, but instead, a burning hot piece of iron. Whoever touched it would be burned. Just as Kendall had decided to throw the cub back, a terrifying roar was heard as a black figure instantly flew at him. The large, stinky mouth of the tiger then immediately bit down on Kendall's chest. There was simply no time for Kendall to react. The entire top half of his body was in the jaws of the Golden Fur Tiger King, and its extremely sharp fangs sank deep within Kendall's body. Blood began to spurt out of his wounds like a fountain, covering the entire top part of his body with a bloody red color. Ah! Kendall screamed in pain and desolation. The moment Kendall had been bitten by the tiger, his voice had already sounded weaker. Captain Kendall. Uncle Kendall. Seeing the top part of Kendall's body being bitten by the tiger, every single member of the Flame Mercenaries glared in hatred at the tiger as they cried out in heart-piercing tones. The heart-wrenching screams of all the Flame Mercenaries reached the ears of Jian Chen, who immediately withdrew from the foliage with a fearful face. Seeing Kendall pale with fright and blood loss from having the entire top part of his body bitten, Jian Chen let out a shout of alarm. The light wind sword instantly materialized in his right hand and exploded with a powerful, silver glow as sword chi coiled around the blade. Whoosh! The sword separated from Jian Chen's palm almost as if it had turned into an intelligent immortal sword and flew toward the Golden Fur Tiger King's head. The moment the sword brimming with sword chi hit the head of the tiger, it only penetrated a small layer of fur, practically doing no heavy amount of damage to it. Although Jian Chen's soul sword was stronger than his regular attacks by tenfold, the Golden Fur Tiger King was a Class 5 magical beast. Since Jian Chen was no more than a middle great saint, inflicting a serious injury was an inconceivable event. Ho! Feeling a small tinge of pain on his head, the tiger's eyes turned crimson as they looked at Jian Chen. With a mighty force, it tore Kendall's body in two. The top part of Kendall's body was immediately swallowed by the Golden Fur Tiger King as the lower half of his body immediately fell to the floor. Blood began to spill everywhere. Uncle Kendall. Seeing the lower half of Kendall's body fall to the ground, everyone in the group let out a horrified yell as their eyes teared up in anguish. Ho! The tiger snarled as it leapt toward where Jian Chen was. Using the profound steps, Jian Chen flew like a speed demon a few distances away in order to dodge the attack of the tiger. At the same time, the spinning light wind sword transformed into a silver streak of light that reorientated itself in midair, and shot toward the tiger's head once more. However, just as the light wind sword was about to pierce into the tiger's head, the Golden Fur Tiger King's tail disappeared in a blur and slapped against the light wind sword with a firm blow. Clang! The seemingly soft tail of the tiger was surprisingly strong as the light wind sword collided with the tail, creating a crisp sound. The sword was sent flying a few meters away as the incredibly strong sword chi around it disappeared, and the sword returned to its normal appearance once more. Jian Chen's figure shook slightly as his face began to pale. Slowly, a trickle of blood began to leak out from his mouth because of what happened to his saint weapon. His light wind sword symbolized his cultivation, and after using his spirit to control it, no matter how much damage was done to it in this state, Jian Chen would feel the direct consequence. While the tail of the tiger hadn't hit Jian Chen directly, the damage done to the light wind sword was clearly beyond what it could take, making Jian Chen take on the additional damage. The golden fur tiger king disappeared along with its shadow as it flew toward Jian Chen at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Both of its claws immediately swung down with devastating power toward Jian Chen's chest. Jian Chen attempted to dodge, but was unfortunately slower than the golden fur tiger king. Because of his wounds from earlier, he was not able to completely evade the tiger's attack. The claws of the tiger carried a cold wind as they struck into Jian Chen's chest. At the same time, his chest became mutilated, and parts of his chest bones could be seen. With a great groan of pain, Jian Chen grew as pale as paper as he felt the fierce pain. Against a Class 5 magical beast, Jian Chen had no way to protect himself, and even the soul sword he was so proud of wasn't enough to leave even the smallest of wounds on the golden fur tiger king. Jian Chen, hurry up and escape. I'll stall for you. Xiao Dao cried out suddenly as he pulled out his small dagger and raised it to stab at the tiger's body. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.